The universe has a way of answering questions no one should ask. When Imperial scientists began studying the spatial anomaly in the Kinoween system, the wound in reality where the UNSC Infinity had vanished, they did so with the arrogance of those who believe themselves masters of the galaxy. They probed the dimensional boundaries with sensors and probe droids, mapped the exotic radiation patterns, and cataloged the ways reality bent and twisted around that cosmic scar. What they did not anticipate was that some wounds, when prodded, bleed. The Imperial Research Station threshold hung in space 300 kilometers from the anomaly, a modular construct of laboratories, sensor arrays, and detention cells where prisoners were subjected to experiments testing the effects of dimensional radiation on living tissue. The facility's commander, Moff Jarek Tain, stood in the primary observation deck watching technicians manipulate holographic controls that directed energy pulses into the anomaly's swirling depths. "Increase the resonance frequency to 0.74, Tain ordered. His gray uniform crisp despite 3 months of uninterrupted research duty. "Lord Vader wants results, and we will provide them." The lead scientist, a nervous Bith named Dr. Nula, adjusted her equipment with 4-fingered hands. "Moff Tain, I must protest again. We don't understand the fundamental physics governing this anomaly. Increasing energy input could destabilize." "Your concerns are noted and dismissed," Tain interrupted. "The Emperor himself has expressed interest in trans-dimensional travel. We will unlock this anomaly's secrets, or we will be replaced by those more competent. Now increase the frequency." Dr. Nula complied, her large black eyes reflecting worry as energy readings spiked across her displays. The spatial anomaly responded to the Imperial probing like a living thing, its swirling colors intensifying, pulsing with building power. For 3 hours, the experiment continued. Energy was poured into the dimensional wound, sensors recorded impossible data, and the anomaly grew larger, more unstable, more hungry, and then it tore. The breach happened without warning. One moment the anomaly was contained, the next it exploded outward in a cascade of dimensional energy that overwhelmed the research station shields. Reality itself seemed to scream as the tear widened, and through that impossible gap, something emerged. Ships. Dozens of them. They were unlike anything in Imperial databases, sleek, organic-looking vessels that seemed grown rather than built. Their hulls a deep purple that absorbed light in ways that defied physics. The largest was over 3 kilometers long, shaped like an elongated teardrop with a bulbous command section and graceful curves that suggested biological inspiration. Smaller craft swarmed around it, fighters and corvettes that moved with unsettling coordination, and they were not alone. The research station's sensors screamed warnings as more vessels poured through the breach. Massive carriers, their hulls bristling with launch bays, cruisers crackling with purple energy fields, and bringing up the rear, something that made even hardened Imperial officers stare in disbelief. A ship nearly 30 kilometers long, its form an asymmetrical amalgamation of curves and angles, glowing with internal power that lit the void like a miniature sun. On the bridge of the lead vessel, a CCS-class battlecruiser named Pious Inquisitor Supreme Commander Thel Vadum stood at the holographic display, his mandibles clicking in confusion and battle readiness. The Sangheili warrior was clad in golden armor that marked his rank, energy sword hilts hanging at his sides, amber eyes scanning the tactical data with predatory focus. "Navigation, report," Thel commanded in the guttural language of the Sangheili. "Where has the slipspace rupture delivered us?" The navigation officer, a younger Sangheili named Usei Taham, worked frantically at his station. "Commander, our stellar cartography does not match any known systems. The constellations are wrong. This is not our galaxy." Thel's mandibles flared a gesture of surprise. "Impossible. Slipspace drives do not travel between galaxies." "Yet here we are," Usei replied. "And Commander, we are detecting an artificial structure ahead. Unknown configuration, broadcasting on frequencies we do not recognize. And..." He paused, uncertainty crossing his features. "There are no Forerunner signatures. Nothing. As if we have entered space the gods never touched." On the research station threshold, alarms wailed as tactical officers scrambled to make sense of the impossible. Moff Tain, The unknown vessels are powering weapons. A tactical officer shouted. Energy signatures are off the scale, nothing like turbolasers or ion cannons. It's some kind of superheated plasma technology. Tane stared at the tactical display, his mind racing. These ships had emerged from the dimensional breach. Were they connected to the UNSC vessel that had humiliated the Empire months ago? Were they allies of those Spartan warriors? Hail them, Tane ordered. All frequencies. Demand identification and state that they are in Imperial space and must submit to. He never finished the sentence. The pious Inquisitor fired. Plasma torpedoes, superheated balls of contained fusion that burned at millions of degrees, streaked across the void. They impacted the research station's shields in brilliant explosions that turned night into day. The Imperial deflector shields, designed to dissipate energy weapons, struggled against the plasma's sustained heat and kinetic impact. Shields at 60%, the tactical officer reported. Return fire. All batteries. Engage. The research station's defensive turbolaser swiveled and fired. Green bolts lancing across space toward the Covenant fleet. The shots struck the pious Inquisitor's energy shields and were absorbed completely. The shields flickering but holding with technology that operated on entirely different principles than Imperial deflectors. Thel Vadam watched the green energy weapons strike his ship's shields with interest. These beings possess directed energy weapons, but their technology is crude, primitive. They dare fire upon vessels of the Covenant? His mandibles spread in what might have been a smile. Weapons. Target their power generation centers. Show them the price of heresy? More plasma torpedoes launched, along with pulse lasers that carve through space and sustain beams of purple death. The research station's shields collapsed under the onslaught, and plasma began eating through the station's hull plating, melting durasteel and vaporizing interior compartments. We're losing structural integrity. Someone screamed over the comm. Evacuate. Evacuate. Moff Tane grabbed the communications console. This is threshold to any Imperial forces in range. We are under attack by unknown hostiles emerging from the dimensional anomaly. Require immediate. A plasma torpedo struck the command deck directly. The observation windows exploded inward. Atmosphere rushed out into the void, and Moff Tane had just enough time to realize his experiments had doomed him before vacuum and plasma claimed his life. The research station threshold broke apart in a series of secondary explosions, debris spreading in a slowly expanding cloud. A few escape pods launched, but Covenant fighters' single-pilot craft called Seraphs pursued them with ruthless efficiency, their plasma cannons reducing the pods to vapor. On the pious Inquisitor, Thel Vadam studied the destruction with satisfaction. These beings are weak, their weapons ineffective, their defenses inadequate. But their presence here suggests purpose. He turned to his communications officer. Send word to the fleet of particular justice. We have encountered unknown hostiles in uncharted space. Request reinforcements and guidance from the hierarchs. At once. Commander, the officer replied. What Thel did not know, what he could not know, was that the research station had transmitted its distress call before being destroyed. And that call had reached ears far more dangerous than any Supreme Commander. 3 star systems away, the Superstar Destroyer Executor received the transmission. On its bridge, Admiral Piet listened to the frantic final moments of Moff Tane's message, his face growing pale. Admiral, we're detecting massive energy signatures at the Kinoane anomaly, a sensor officer reported. Multiple unknown vessels, capital ship class and larger. They've destroyed threshold and are holding position at the breach point. Piet activated the internal comm with hands that trembled slightly. My lord, we have a situation that requires your immediate attention. Minutes later, Darth Vader stood on the bridge, his breathing apparatus cycling with mechanical rhythm as he listened to the report. The tactical display showed the Kinoane system, the dimensional breach, now a gaping wound in reality, and the unknown fleet holding position like a conquering army securing a beachhead. Unknown vessels, Vader said, his voice laden with dark contemplation, emerged from the dimensional anomaly, using plasma-based weapons that penetrated Imperial shields. He turned to Piet. Are these the same vessels that escaped us? The UNSC? No, my lord. Piet replied. The energy signatures are completely different. These ships appear to be of organic design, and their weapons technology is plasma-based rather than kinetic. We're dealing with an entirely different civilization. Vader was silent for a moment, reaching out through the Force to sense the truth. He felt something. Not the void that the UNSC ship had represented, but something different. Minds, thousands of them, alien and fierce, and driven by purpose he could not immediately comprehend. But there was something else. Something underlying their consciousness that felt almost religious in its fervor. Assemble a task force, Vader commanded. 4-star destroyers, full TIE complements, and the Executor. We will investigate these intruders and determine if they are connected to our quarry. And Admiral? Yes, my lord? Prepare boarding teams. I will personally interrogate their command staff. These beings will learn what happens to those who destroy Imperial property. As the Executor and its escort began their journey toward the Kinoween system, neither the Empire nor the Covenant understood what they had begun. Two galactic powers, each accustomed to absolute dominance, each believing themselves chosen by destiny or divinity, were about to collide. In the Covenant holy city of High Charity, a massive mushroom-shaped space station housing billions and serving as the mobile capital of the Theocratic Alliance, the three High Prophets received Thel Vidam's report with great 10W1 interest. The Prophet of Truth, eldest of the three, studied the holographic data with his one good eye. Unknown beings, unknown space, a galaxy the Forerunners never touched. His voice was ancient and calculating. This breach could be a sign, a test of our faith. The Prophet of Regret, younger and more impulsive, leaned forward on his gravity throne. Or it could be a pathway to new worlds to convert, new species to bring into the Covenant fold. We should send more ships, establish a presence in this new realm. The Prophet of Mercy, withered and philosophical, spoke quietly. We should proceed with caution. The Forerunners sealed many things away for reasons we do not fully understand. What if this breach leads not to glory, but to ancient dangers? Then we will face those dangers as we have faced all others, Truth replied. With faith in the great journey and the certainty of our divine purpose, prepare the fleet of profound solitude. We will reinforce Commander Vadam's position and establish whether these new beings can be converted or must be destroyed. The decision was made with the casual certainty of those who had never met an equal. The Covenant would expand into this new galaxy, bring these strange beings the truth of the great journey, and claim whatever relics or technology they possessed in service of divine will. Neither empire understood that they had just lit a fuse that would burn across dimensions. And caught between them, monitoring dimensional readings from deep space, the UNSC Infinity's sensors detected the breach reopening, detected the familiar plasma signatures of Covenant vessels, and felt the cold dread of humanity's greatest nightmare returning. Commander Lasky stood on the Infinity's bridge, staring at the sensor data with horror dawning in his eyes. How? He whispered. How did they find us? Master Chief, standing at his customary position, spoke the truth they all feared. They didn't find us. They found the Empire. And now we're caught between two forces that want humanity dead. The war was about to escalate beyond anything the galaxy far, far away had ever experienced. And in the spaces between dimensions, reality itself began to crack under the strain of three universes colliding. The dimensional breach pulsed with malevolent energy, growing larger with each passing hour. And through it, more ships were coming. The Imperial Task Force emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Kinoween system in perfect formation. 5-star destroyers arranged around the massive Executor, their wedge-shaped hulls gleaming under the light of the system's distant star. On the bridge of the Superstar Destroyer, Darth Vader stood before the main viewport, his black armor absorbing light, his presence radiating darkness that made even veteran officers uncomfortable. Distance to the unknown fleet? Vader asked, his mechanical voice cutting through the ambient bridge noise. 70,000 kilometers and closing, my lord. Admiral Piet replied from his command station. The fleet composition has grown since the initial contact. We now count 43 capital ships, over 200 smaller craft, and what appears to be a mobile command station approximately 15 kilometers in diameter. It's He paused, checking his readouts again. It's shaped like a mushroom, my lord. Vader turned his masked face toward the Admiral. A mushroom. Yes, my lord. Tactical analysis suggests it houses massive population centers and military facilities. It may be their command headquarters. On the tactical display, the Covenant fleet hung in space around the dimensional breach, their purple-hulled vessels arranged in a formation that suggested both military discipline and ceremonial positioning. The largest ships, the CSO-class supercarriers and CAS-class assault carriers, formed a protective screen around the smaller vessels, while fighters patrolled the perimeter in complex patterns. Hail them, Vader commanded. Demand identification and surrender. These beings will learn Imperial authority, or they will learn Imperial wrath. The communications officer transmitted on all known frequencies, broadcasting in every language the Empire had encountered. The message was simple. Identify yourselves, acknowledge Imperial sovereignty, prepare for boarding and inspection. The Covenant fleet's response came not in words, but in movement. Aboard the Pious Inquisitor, Supreme Commander Thel, Vadam watched the Imperial fleet's approach with tactical interest. The vessels were impressive in their own way, massive, intimidating, clearly built for projecting power. But they were also crude, their designs lacking the elegant curves and divine inspiration of Covenant engineering. They broadcast demands in languages we do not comprehend, Tahum reported. But their tone and posture suggest arrogance. They believe themselves our superiors. Thel's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Then they are fools. Have the translators analyzed their transmissions? Working on it, Commander. The linguistic algorithms are attempting to find patterns. But these beings' communication methods are entirely foreign. However, highlighted a section of the transmission's waveform. There are mathematical constants embedded in the signal. Standard first contact protocols. They are attempting communication, but their message seems to be a demand rather than a greeting. Heretics, Thel growled. They destroy our research outpost without provocation, now demand our submission? The audacity. He turned to his weapons officer. Prepare plasma torpedoes. Target the lead vessel. Let us see how their shields handle divine fire. Commander, perhaps we should attempt further communication first, suggested carefully. We do not know their capabilities, their numbers, or They fired upon the Covenant, Thel interrupted, his voice carrying the weight of religious certainty. That is all we need to know. The prophets have decreed that all who oppose the great journey must be brought to heel or destroyed. These beings will learn humility, or they will learn death. The Pious Inquisitor's plasma torpedo tubes glowed with building energy. On the Executor, the sensor operator called out urgently. My lord, the lead alien vessel is charging weapons. Energy buildup consistent with their previous attack on the research station. Evasive maneuvers, Piet ordered. All ships, battle stations, prepare to. The plasma torpedoes launched brilliant purple-white spheres of superheated fusion that crossed the distance at relativistic speeds. They struck the Executor's forward shields in cascading explosions that lit up the void like miniature suns. The Superstar Destroyer shuddered under the impact, and emergency klaxons wailed as power systems struggled to compensate. Shields at 78%. Tactical reported. My lord, those weapons are incredibly powerful. Energy output exceeds turbo laser equivalents by a factor of 3. Our shields are holding, but sustained bombardment will overwhelm them. Vader's gloved hand clenched into a fist. So be it. They choose war. We will show them war. All ships open fire, target their largest vessels, and launch all TIE squadrons. I want those fighters eliminated. The Imperial fleet responded with overwhelming force. Turbo lasers from 5 Star Destroyers lit up space with emerald death, hundreds of bolts converging on the Covenant fleet. The green energy beams struck Covenant shields and were largely absorbed, but the sheer volume of fire began to stress the defensive systems. Return fire came immediately. Pulse lasers and plasma torpedoes from dozens of Covenant vessels, turning the void into a light show of purple and green. From the Executor's launch bays, thousands of TIE fighters screamed into space. TIE LN fighters, TIE interceptors and TIE bombers. their twin ion engines creating a swarm of Imperial might. They formed attack formations and accelerated toward the Covenant fleet with aggressive confidence. What they encountered shattered that confidence immediately. Covenant Seraph fighters met them head-on, sleek, teardrop-shaped craft that moved with impossible agility. Where TIE fighters relied on overwhelming numbers and acceptable loss rates, Seraph fighters were piloted by Sangheili with warrior traditions spanning millennia. The first wave of TIs ran straight into a wall of plasma fire that vaporized dozens in seconds. But the TIE pilots were not without skill. They adapted quickly, using their numbers to swarm individual Seraphs, sacrificing fighters to create openings. Green laser fire from hundreds of TIEs converged on single targets, and Seraph shields began to fail under the concentrated assault. The fighter battle devolved into a savage furball, thousands of craft weaving through plasma torpedoes and turbolaser fire. Explosions blooming constantly as both sides took casualties. It was brutal, chaotic, and utterly without mercy. On the Pious Inquisitor, Thel Vadam monitored the battle with growing respect for these unknown foes. They fight with courage, if not skill. Their fighters are inferior, but they use them well like the Ungoi. Expendable but numerous. Commander, we're receiving transmissions from the fleet of Profound Solitude, Usei reported. The Prophet's reinforcements have arrived. Through the dimensional breach, more Covenant vessels poured into the Star Wars galaxy. The fleet of Profound Solitude was massive, over 100 capital ships, led by the assault carrier Resplendent Fervor, and commanding that vessel was someone whose reputation made even supreme commanders wary. Shipmaster Artas Vadum, known as the Half-Jaw for the mandibles he'd lost in combat against the Flood, stood on his bridge, studying the tactical situation with his remaining eye. The scarred Sangheili veteran had fought in more battles than most warriors could count, and he assessed this situation with cold tactical precision. So, Rutes growled, his damaged mandibles clicking, we interrupt a holy mission to rescue Thel from his own arrogance. Again. He turned to his crew. Battle formation. All ships. Spread out and envelop the enemy fleet. These heretics believe themselves powerful? Let us educate them. The arrival of Covenant reinforcements changed the tactical picture dramatically. The Imperial fleet was suddenly outnumbered nearly 3-1, surrounded on multiple vectors, and facing weapons that bypassed their shield's optimal defensive parameters. Admiral Piet recognized the danger immediately. My lord, we're being flanked. Recommend we withdraw to a more defensible position and call for our own reinforcements. No, Vader said flatly. We do not retreat. We demonstrate Imperial superiority. He reached out through the Force, feeling the alien minds commanding those vessels fierce, proud, absolutely certain of their righteousness. And beneath it all, that strange religious fervor that permeated their every thought. They believed they served gods. Vader would show them the dark side was more powerful than any deity. Admiral, focus all fire on that mushroom-shaped station, Vader commanded. If it is their command center, its destruction will break their coordination. My lord, that station is heavily shielded and defended. It will take sustained fire from our entire fleet to, then provide that fire, Vader interrupted. And prepare my shuttle. I will board one of their capital ships personally. These aliens will learn to fear the dark side of the Force, or they will die ignorant. As the Executor and its escorts redirected fire toward the portion of high charity that had accompanied the fleet, Urtaz Vadum recognized the threat immediately. These strange beings were targeting the holy city blasphemy that could not be tolerated. All ships, priority target the largest enemy vessel, Rurtiers commanded. The heretics dare threaten holy ground. We will burn them from existence. The Covenant fleet converged on the Executor with concentrated fury, plasma torpedoes, pulse lasers, and energy projectors, massive beam weapons that could slice ships in half, all focused on the Super Star Destroyer. The Executor's shields flared brilliant white under the onslaught, holding but degrading rapidly. Shields at 40%, the tactical officer reported, his voice rising in pitch. Hull breaches on decks 47 through 52. We're taking casualties. Piet turned to Vader, desperation breaking through his professional composure. My lord, we cannot sustain this. We must. Vader raised his hand, and P had felt invisible pressure around his throat, not enough to harm, but enough to remind him of his place. We will not retreat. Call for reinforcements. All nearby Imperial assets are to converge on this location immediately. And launch my shuttle. Now. The Admiral gasped as the force grip released. Yes, my lord. At once. Vader's personal shuttle, a heavily modified Lambda class with reinforced shields and armored hull, launched from the Executor's primary hangar, escorted by a squadron of TIE advanced fighters. The Sith Lord stood in the passenger compartment, reaching out through the Force toward the nearest Covenant capital ship, feeling for its bridge, its commander, the minds he would break. The shuttle and its escorts accelerated toward the pious Inquisitor, weaving through plasma fire and dogfighting seraphs. 2 TIE fighters exploded, then 3 more. But the shuttle pressed on, its pilot driven by fear of failure that exceeded fear of death. On the pious Inquisitor, Usay Taham called out a warning. Commander, enemy shuttle approaching our position. It's heavily shielded and escorted. Attempting to board us. Thel's eyes widened, then narrowed. Bold. Very bold. These beings have courage at least. He activated his energy swords, elegant plasma blades that sprang to life with a distinctive snap hiss. Glowing brilliant blue. Prepare security teams. If they wish to board the pious Inquisitor, let them. We will teach them why none challenge Sangheili warriors aboard their own vessels. The Imperial shuttle clamped onto the Covenant cruiser's hull with magnetic docking clamps, and cutting lasers began burning through the hull plating. Inside, Darth Vader ignited his lightsaber, the crimson blade humming with dark side energy, and waited for the breach to complete. Behind him, 24 elite stormtroopers and 4 Imperial Royal Guards stood ready, their weapons charged, their training preparing them for boarding actions against any enemy. What they were not prepared for was what waited on the other side of that breach. The hull plating finally gave way, and Vader stepped through into a corridor that was immediately wrong. The architecture was curved, organic, more like the interior of a living creature than a warship. The lighting was purple and dim, and the air smelled of ozone and something else, something alien and unsettling. And standing in the corridor, blocking their path, were warriors unlike anything the Empire had encountered. Sangheili in combat harness over 8 feet tall, powerfully built, their reptilian features bearing expressions of fierce determination. They wore armor that shimmered with energy shielding, and they carried weapons that hummed with contained plasma. Behind them, larger figures loomed Mgalek Golo, the Hunter Pairs, towering colonies of worms in massive armor, carrying fuel rod cannons that could vaporize ships. For a moment, both sides simply stared at each other. Imperial forces confronting alien warriors, and Sangheili facing the strange armored figure with the glowing red blade. Then Thel Vadam stepped forward from behind his warriors, energy swords ignited. Mandibles spread in challenge. So, Thel said in his own language, which the stormtroopers couldn't understand, but whose meaning was clear from tone alone, the heretic leader comes to face me personally. Good. I will enjoy ending you. Vader tilted his masked head slightly, studying this alien warrior through the Force. He felt honor, warrior pride, religious conviction, and beneath it all, a core of disciplined ferocity that reminded him, disturbingly, of the Jedi he had once fought beside. You cannot comprehend the power you face, Vader said, his voice carrying dark authority even though Thel could not understand the words. I am Lord Vader, and you will kneel or you will die. Thel responded by lunging forward with impossible speed, energy swords moving in precise arcs designed to dismember and kill. Vader's lightsaber met the energy swords in a clash of technologies that should not have been compatible. Red plasma blade against blue plasma blades, the dark side of the Force against alien warrior discipline forged over millennia. The duel had begun, and with it, the true first contact between 2 galactic powers, who would rather die than admit defeat. Behind them, stormtroopers and Sangheili warriors opened fire, and the corridor erupted into chaos. In space, the battle raged on, plasma and turbo lasers turning the void into a cauldron of destruction. And through the dimensional breach, unseen by either side, sensors were watching. The UNSC Infinity had detected the battle and was moving closer. trying to assess the threat. Commander Lasky stood on his bridge, watching the tactical display with growing horror. "They're killing each other," he said quietly. "The Empire and the Covenant are in a full-scale battle, and neither of them knows what they've started." Master Chief stood beside him, arms crossed, his voice grave. "Sir, if the Covenant gains access to this galaxy, if they can move freely between dimensions, then they bring their holy war here," Lasky finished. "Billions dead. Entire species converted or exterminated. Everything we've fought to protect, destroyed." "So what do we do?" Chief asked, though he already knew the answer. Lasky stared at the battle, at two evil empires tearing each other apart, and made the hardest decision of his command career. "We intervene. Not to save either side, but to close that dimensional breach before both universes burn." The Infinity's engines flared to life, and humanity's most advanced warship moved toward a battle between forces that each outmatched it in numbers, technology, and raw power. But the UNSC had something neither empire possessed: experience fighting both of them, and that experience was about to make all the difference. Emperor Palpatine sat upon his throne in the heart of the Imperial Palace on Coruscant, his withered hands resting on the armrests, his yellow eyes closed as he reached out through the Force across impossible distances. The dark side responded to his call, showing him fragments of the battle unfolding, at the dimensional breach flashes of purple fire, alien minds burning with religious fervor, and his apprentice locked in combat with something that should not exist. "Interesting," the Emperor whispered to the empty throne room, his voice a dry rasp. So very interesting. He had felt the dimensional breach reopen, had sensed the strange presence that poured through it, not the void that the UNSC represented, but something different. These new beings were present in the Force, their life energies visible, but their minds were structured in ways that resisted his usual manipulations. They believed in gods with a certainty that bordered on madness, and that faith created a kind of barrier against direct Force influence. But faith could be exploited, certainty could be twisted, and religious zealots, Palpatine knew from long experience, were often the easiest to manipulate once you understood what they worshipped. Lord Vader faces a worthy opponent, Palpatine mused, sensing his apprentice's struggle. Good. He has grown complacent in his power. A reminder of mortality will sharpen his focus. But more than Vader's personal challenge, Palpatine sensed opportunity. These alien beings possessed technology that operated on different principles than Imperial science. Their weapons were devastatingly effective, their shields robust, and their ships built with engineering philosophy that suggested centuries of refinement. If the Empire could capture and reverse engineer even a fraction of that technology, the Emperor's thin lips curved into something approximating a smile. Let Vader fight his battle. Let the Imperial Navy test these newcomers' strength. The information gained would be invaluable, and if these aliens proved too powerful to conquer directly, well, there were other methods of control. Religious fanatics always had weaknesses, and Palpatine had spent a lifetime learning to exploit them. He reached out through the Force to another presence, Grand Admiral Thrawn, currently commanding operations in the unknown regions. The Chiss officer was unconventional, brilliant, and most importantly, capable of thinking beyond standard Imperial doctrine. Grand Admiral. Palpatine's voice echoed through the Force and through secure communication simultaneously. "I have a task requiring your particular expertise. Discontinue current operations and proceed to the Kinuini system. You will study these new adversaries and determine how best to exploit their cultural and military weaknesses. Do not engage directly unless necessary. Observe, analyze, and report." Thousands of light years away, aboard the Star Destroyer Chimera, Grand Admiral Thrawn received the Emperor's command with his usual calm efficiency. The blue-skinned Chiss studied the preliminary sensor data from the Kinoine battle with red eyes that saw patterns where others saw only chaos. "Fascinating," Thrawn murmured, his accented voice carrying intellectual curiosity rather than alarm. "A theocratic military alliance. Multi-species coalition united by religious doctrine. Plasma-based weapons suggesting sustained fusion technology. Ship designs that prioritize elegance and symbolism alongside functionality." He zoomed in on a captured image of a Covenant cruiser. "Art in warfare. Every curve deliberate. every color choice meaningful. These are not mere conquerors, they are believers engaged in holy war. His tactical officer, Commander Vanto, approached hesitantly. Sir, the Emperor wants us to observe only, not engage? For now, Thrawn confirmed. Violence is the language of those who lack subtlety. These beings can be defeated, Commander, but not through brute force alone. First, we must understand what they believe, what they value, and what they fear. Then we will know precisely where to strike to shatter their cohesion. He turned from the display. Set course for Kino-Wine system. Maximum speed. And, Commander, I want xenobiologists, cultural analysts, and combat psychologists standing by. We are about to study an entirely new form of adversary. Aboard the pious Inquisitor, Darth Vader and Thel 'Vadam fought with a fury that neither had expected to encounter. The corridor had become a battlefield, stormtroopers and Sangheili warriors trading fire, plasma bolts melting armor while blaster fire cracked shields. Bodies falling on both sides as centuries of military tradition clashed. But the central duel transcended the chaos around it. Thel moved with the trained precision of a blade master, his twin energy swords creating a defensive pattern that few opponents could penetrate. Each strike was economical, purposeful, designed to exploit openings and create killing opportunities. He had fought Spartans before the demonic human warriors in powered armor and won. This black armored being, whatever it was, would fall like all the others. But Vader was not human anymore. Not in any way that mattered. He was a weapon shaped by the dark side, his movements guided by precognition that showed him Thel's attacks before they fully formed. His lightsaber wove a crimson pattern of death, and the Force augmented his already formidable strength to levels that made each blow catastrophic. Their blades met again, red against blue, and the energy discharge lit the corridor like lightning. Thel pressed forward with a sequence of strikes that would have overwhelmed any opponent. But Vader parried each one, his mechanical breathing never faltering, his focus absolute. You are skilled, Vader admitted, his mechanical voice somehow conveying grudging respect. But skill alone cannot defeat the power of the dark side. Vader reached out with the Force and pushed. Thel felt invisible force strike him like a physical blow, sending him sliding backward several meters, his hooves scraping against the deck plating. Surprise registered in his amber eyes. He had been moved by nothing visible, by no weapon or technology. He understood. Heretic sorcery. Thel snarled in his own language. But his eyes showed unease. He had heard tales of human demons who could move objects with thought, who could kill without weapons. But he had dismissed such stories as propaganda meant to frighten the faithful. Now, facing it directly, he was forced to reconsider. Vader advanced, his lightsaber raised. I can sense your doubt. Your certainty wavers. You begin to understand that your gods are silent, while my power is very real. But Thel 'Vadam had not survived countless battles by abandoning his convictions at the first sign of supernatural opposition. He was Sangheili warrior, born, bred for combat, trained from childhood to face death without fear. If this being possessed strange powers, then Thel would adapt. The gods test us, Thel growled, igniting his energy swords once more. And I will not be found wanting. He lunged again, but this time with different tactics, feinting high, striking low, using his superior speed and agility to offset Vader's Force precognition. The energy swords carved burning lines across Vader's armor, damaging but not penetrating the composite material. In return, Vader's lightsaber scored deep cuts across Thel's shields, each impact weakening the energy barrier protecting the Sangheili's flesh. Behind them, the battle continued with brutal intensity. Amgala Golo lumbered forward, its fuel rod cannon charging with green light. It fired, and the superheated radioactive projectile struck an Imperial Royal Guard, disintegrating him instantly. The remaining guards focused their force pikes on the hunter, but the creature's thick armor shrugged off the energy weapons. A stormtrooper threw a thermal detonator. The explosive landed among a group of Ungoi, the small, methane-breathing grunts who formed the Covenant's cannon fodder. The detonation killed 3 and sent the others scurrying for cover, their methane tanks rupturing and igniting in secondary explosions. The corridor had become hell smoke, blood both red and luminous blue, and the screams of the dying filled the air. Neither side was winning. Both were simply surviving through sheer determination and acceptance of casualties. Then reinforcements arrived for both sides. More stormtroopers poured through the breach point Vader had created. Along with Imperial Navy troopers and combat engineers, they brought heavier weapons, E-Web repeating blasters, thermal imploders, and anti-vehicle missiles. From the Covenant side, more Sangheili warriors arrived, along with Jiralhane the Brutes, massive ape-like warriors in powered armor who carried gravity hammers and spikers. Behind them came something that made even the stormtroopers hesitate. Sangheili zealots in gold armor, religious warriors of such skill that they were considered touched by the gods themselves. The battle escalated from skirmish to full boarding action, both sides pouring forces into the contested corridor, turning it into a meat grinder where victory would be measured in meters and casualties. Above them, in the command center of the Pious Inquisitor, Usay Taham coordinated the ship's defense while monitoring reports from across the fleet. The tactical situation was degrading. Imperial reinforcements had arrived. 6 more Star Destroyers and dozens of support vessels, evening the numerical odds. The battle had spread across the entire region around the dimensional breach. Capital ships trading devastating fire while fighters and bombers engaged in swirling dogfights. Shipmaster Vadum reports the Resplendent Fervor has disabled one of the enemy capital ships. Usay reported to himself, since Thel was occupied below. But we've lost 3 cruisers and 17 frigates. The heretics' weapons are less powerful than ours individually, but their rate of fire and numbers are overwhelming our defenses. On his display, another Covenant ship, the frigate Sacred Promise, took concentrated turbolaser fire from multiple Star Destroyers. Its shields collapsed, and the green bolts tore through the hull, igniting plasma conduits and triggering a catastrophic reactor failure. The frigate broke apart in a brilliant explosion that consumed 2 nearby Seraph squadrons. We need to eliminate their command vessel, Usay decided. The largest one, if we can destroy it, their coordination will suffer. He activated fleet-wide communications. All ships, concentrate fire on the largest enemy vessel. Target designated Alpha 1. Pour everything into it. The Covenant fleet responded with coordinated precision. Dozens of ships redirected their fire toward the Executor, and the Superstar Destroyer shields began failing under the onslaught of concentrated plasma. Multiple hull breaches appeared, atmosphere venting into space, entire sections going dark as power systems failed. Aboard the Executor, Admiral Piet watched his ship dying around him. All hands, abandon aft sections 12 through 24, seal bulkheads, redirect all power to forward shields. A plasma torpedo struck the bridge tower directly, and the entire structure shook. Sparks flew from overloaded consoles, and 3 officers were thrown from their stations. Emergency lighting cast everything in red shadow. My lord is still aboard that alien vessel, Piet realized with horror. If we withdraw, we'll abandon him. The communications officer, his face pale with fear and blood running from a gash on his forehead, spoke quietly. Sir, Lord Vader's shuttle is destroyed. Multiple witnesses confirm it was hit by plasma fire. He has no extraction method. Piet felt his blood run cold. Vader was trapped on an enemy capital ship. In the middle of a battle the Empire was losing, with no way to escape. The Admiral faced an impossible choice. Stay and fight until the Executor was destroyed, or withdraw and leave Vader to his fate. Before he could decide, a new voice entered the tactical net, cold, precise, and carrying absolute authority. This is Grand Admiral Thrawn to all Imperial forces in the Kinoween system. I am assuming tactical command. All ships, execute withdrawal pattern Omega-7. Disengage and retreat to rally point Arek. Piet felt relief wash through him. Someone with authority to make the call had taken the decision from his hands. All ships, you heard the Grand Admiral. Execute withdrawal pattern Omega-7. Prepare to jump to hyperspace. The Imperial fleet began a fighting retreat, their ships covering each other as they disengaged from the Covenant forces. TIE fighters and bombers provided screens, while the capital ships powered their hyperdrive systems. But the Covenant pressed their advantage, sensing victory. Reteus. Vadam's voice boomed across the fleet communications. Do not let them escape. Press forward. The gods grant us victory this day. Covenant ships pursued the retreating Imperials, plasma torpedoes and pulse lasers continuing to claim victims. 2 more Star Destroyers were crippled, left as burning wrecks for the Covenant to capture or destroy at leisure. And then something changed. Every sensor in the system, Imperial, Covenant, and the UNSC Infinity's long-range arrays detected a massive energy buildup at the edge of the battle space. Space itself seemed to ripple. And then a slip space rupture tore open, far larger than any before. Through it emerged a vessel that dwarfed even the Executor and the largest Covenant carriers, the UNSC Infinity. Commander Lasky stood on his bridge, looking at the carnage displayed on the tactical screens, dozens of destroyed or crippled ships, debris fields spreading for thousands of kilometers, and 2 fleets of hostile forces that had just noticed his arrival. Well, Lasky said quietly, we have their attention. Now comes the hard part. Master Chief moved to the tactical station, his armored form ready for whatever came next. Sir, both fleets are reorienting. They're treating us as the priority target. Of course they are, Lasky replied. To the Empire, we're escaped fugitives. To the Covenant, we're humanity. Their religious mission is to exterminate us. Both of them want us dead more than they want to fight each other. So what's the plan? Sarah Palmer asked, her Spartan armor scarred from the last battle with the Empire. Lasky looked at the dimensional breach, pulsing with unstable energy, growing larger with each hour. He thought about 3 universes on a collision course. About the catastrophe that would unfold if the Covenant gained unrestricted access to the Star Wars galaxy, about the millions who would die if this wasn't stopped here and now. We close the breach, Lasky said. Whatever it takes, we seal that dimensional wound and make sure these 2 sides never meet again. Even if it means we never get home. The Infinity's engines flared to full power, and the massive supercarrier accelerated toward the dimensional rift, its Mach guns swiveling to engage any vessel, Imperial or Covenant that tried to stop them. Behind them, both the Empire and the Covenant fleets began their pursuit, united for the first time by a common enemy, humanity. The battle was about to enter its most desperate phase, and somewhere on the pious Inquisitor, Darth Vader and Thel 'Vadam continued their duel, unaware that the universe was about to change around them. The High Prophets convened in the Sanctum of High Charity's inner chambers, a vast space dominated by holographic projections and floating gravity thrones. The Prophet of Truth hovered at the center, his ancient face illuminated by tactical displays showing the battle's progression. Beside him, the Prophets of Regret and Mercy observed with expressions ranging from eagerness to concern. The heretics flee before our righteous fury, Regret proclaimed, his younger voice carrying satisfaction. Their vessels burn, their warriors fall, and soon their entire civilization will kneel before the Covenant or be consumed by holy fire. And yet, Mercy interjected, his withered form barely visible within his ornate robes, we have lost 14 capital ships, countless fighters, and over 10,000 warriors. These beings, ignorant of the great journey as they are, possess formidable strength. We should not underestimate them. Truth studied the tactical data with his calculating gaze, his mind working through implications his fellow hierarchs had not yet grasped. These beings, these Imperials, as their fragmentary translations suggested, controlled a vast empire spanning countless systems. Their technology, while inferior to Covenant engineering in many respects, was sophisticated and refined through centuries of development. And most intriguingly, their warriors possessed abilities that defied conventional understanding. The recordings from Thel 'Vadam's helmet camera showed the black armored being moving objects without touching them, choking warriors from across rooms, deflecting plasma fire with an energy blade. It resembled the powers attributed to the Forerunners in ancient texts, manipulation of reality through will alone. There is something more here, Truth said slowly. These beings serve no gods, yet their leader wields powers that suggest divine touch, a contradiction that bears investigation. Investigation? Regret scoffed. Hierarch, with respect, we should pour through the breach in full strength, overwhelm these heretics, and claim their territory for the Covenant. Every moment we hesitate is a moment wasted. Hasty action led to the first arbiter's death during the first human war. Mercy reminded him gently. Caution has its place, even in Holy Crusade. Before the debate could continue, alarms wailed throughout High Charity's command center. A junior Sangheili officer rushed forward, mandibles flared in agitation. Holy hierarchs, new contacts detected. A single massive vessel emerging from slipspace, it matches descriptions from our sacred records. It is humanity's demon ship, the vessel our fleets have sought across known space. The holographic display shifted to show the UNSC Infinity accelerating toward the dimensional breach. Its distinctive angular profile unmistakable to anyone who'd studied Covenant intelligence reports. Truth's single eye widened slightly, the closest he ever came to showing surprise. The humans. Here, in this alien space. His mind raced through implications. This is no coincidence. The breach that brought us here, the one the Imperials were studying, it connects to human space. We have found a back door to their strongholds. Then we have been blessed, Regret declared. The great journey has delivered our enemy into our grasp. All ships, pursue the human vessel. It must not escape. Wait, Truth commanded, his voice carrying absolute authority that even Regret dared not ignore. Consider the situation tactically. The humans appear here, in a galaxy they should not be able to reach, at the exact moment we engage a new enemy. They have been here before. They know these Imperials, and now they move toward the breach itself, not away from it. They seek to seal it, Mercy realized, his ancient mind grasping the strategic picture. They would trap our fleet on this side, cut us off from the Covenant proper, and let the Imperials destroy us. Clever, Truth admitted. The humans always were more cunning than the other species we have absorbed. This confirms that they must not reach that breach. But we also cannot allow the Imperials to regroup and return in greater strength. We face strategic dilemma. On the command deck of the Covenant assault carrier Resplendent Fervor, Shipmaster Artas Vadam received the Hierarch's orders with grim determination. Pursue the human ship. Prevent them from reaching the breach. Engage with all available forces. All ships, this is Vadam, he transmitted across the fleet. Change of priorities. The demon vessel takes precedence over the retreating heretics. All weapons, all ships converge on the human craft. For the glory of the Covenant and the completion of the great journey, the Covenant fleet wheeled in space like a vast predatory organism, abandoning their pursuit of the Imperial vessels to focus on the Infinity. Over 100 ships changed course, their plasma weapons charging, their fighters launching in swarms that darkened the stars. Aboard the Chimera, Grand Admiral Thrawn watched this development with analytical interest. His red eyes tracked the movements of both fleets, noting patterns and behaviors that revealed deeper truths. The aliens have abandoned their pursuit of our forces to focus on the UNSC vessel, Commander Vanto observed. This suggests prior hostility between them. Should we exploit this opportunity to withdraw completely? No, Thrawn said thoughtfully, studying an intercepted fragment of Covenant communication that his translators were slowly decoding. Notice the religious terminology permeating their transmissions. Holy, demon, great journey, gods. These beings are not mere conquerors, they are crusaders engaged in theological war, and they have identified humanity as their primary religious enemy. He zoomed in on the Infinity's profile. The UNSC vessel helped the Rebel Alliance against us. Now it appears to be opposed by these religious aliens. An enemy of our enemy, as the saying goes. Though in this case, the mathematics become complex. Thrawn stroked his chin. The prudent action would be to withdraw. Let our two adversaries destroy each other and study the survivors. However, he trailed off, his strategic mind working through scenarios, probabilities, and cultural implications at speeds that made organic computers seem slow. However, sir? Vanto prompted. However, the UNSC vessel is attempting to reach the dimensional breach. Based on their previous behavior, their measured response to Imperial aggression, their alliance with the rebellion, their rules of engagement that prioritize limiting casualties, I believe their intention is not to exploit the breach, but to close it. Vanto looked confused. Why would they close their own escape route? Because they understand something we are only beginning to grasp, Thrawn replied. That breach is unstable, growing. With sufficient energy input, it could expand uncontrollably, potentially tearing holes between dimensions across multiple star systems. The UNSC recognizes that risk and has concluded that sealing the breach, even at cost to themselves, is necessary to prevent catastrophic dimensional collapse. That's remarkably selfless, sir. Indeed. Which suggests these humans, despite their advanced weapons and warrior culture, possess moral framework that prioritizes collective survival over tactical advantage. Fascinating. Thrawn made his decision. Transmit to all Imperial ships, maintain distance but provide covering fire for the UNSC vessel. Do not engage them directly but prevent the alien fleet from overwhelming them before they reach the breach. Sir, Admiral Piet has seniority. Admiral Piet is dealing with damage control on the Executor. I have Imperial authorization to assume command in situations requiring strategic innovation. This qualifies. Thrawn's voice carried finality. Execute the order, Commander, and pray that I have correctly analyzed human intentions, because if I am wrong, we will have aided our enemy in establishing permanent foothold in our galaxy. Aboard the Infinity, Master Chief monitored the tactical display as dozens of Covenant ships converged on their position. He'd fought the Covenant for decades, knew their tactics, their weapons, their absolute refusal to accept defeat when religious conviction was involved. We're severely outnumbered, Captain Palmer reported, her tone professional but concerned. Current count: 107 Covenant capital ships, over 400 fighters, and they're launching boarding craft. They really want us dead, sir. They've wanted humanity dead for 30 years, Chief replied. This is just another Tuesday for them. Commander Lasky studied the distance to the dimensional breach, still 12,000 kilometers away, and they'd have to fight through the entire Covenant fleet to reach it. Dr. Glassman, status on the breach sealing protocols? In his laboratory deep within the Infinity, Glassman worked frantically at holographic controls, his face pale and sweating. Commander, I'm working with theoretical physics that shouldn't be possible. To seal that breach, we'll need to overload our slipspace drive, create a resonance cascade that collapses the dimensional weakness, and do it all while not getting blown to pieces. The calculations alone could take days. You have 30 minutes, Lasky said flatly. Because that's how long until the Covenant fleet overtakes us. Work faster, Doctor. Glassman swore under his breath and redoubled his efforts. The Covenant fleet opened fire. Plasma torpedoes by the hundreds streaked across space brilliant purple-white spheres that had destroyed UNSC ships by the thousands during the Long War. They converged on the Infinity from multiple vectors, a killing storm that would overwhelm any vessel's defenses. The Infinity's point defense systems roared to life. Autocannons tracked incoming plasma, kinetic rounds detonating torpedoes before they reached the hull. But there were too many dozens slipped through, impacting shields and cascading explosions that lit the Infinity's shields like a small sun. Shields at 84% and falling, Tactical reported. Those plasma weapons are designed to counter our shield technology specifically. They're adapting their fire patterns based on our defensive responses. Return fire, Lasky ordered. MAC guns target their largest carriers. Let's remind them what happens when they get our attention. The Series 8 MAC guns fired in sequence thunderous magnetic discharges that sent tungsten rounds downrange at 30 kilometers per second. The rounds crossed the distance almost instantaneously, and 3 Covenant cruisers simply ceased to exist, their shields and hulls unable to withstand the kinetic impacts. A 4th took a glancing hit that tore away half its hull, sending it tumbling out of formation, atmosphere and debris venting from the mortal wound. Splash 4 enemy capital ships. Tactical confirmed with grim satisfaction. But sir, we're detecting boarding craft inbound. Phantoms and Spirits, at least 50 of them, using our point defense engagement as cover. All Spartans to defensive positions, Palmer ordered over the tactical net. Marines, secure all primary access corridors. If they want to board the Infinity, let's show them why that's a really bad idea. In the armory, Spartans from multiple fire teams geared up with weapons specifically chosen for anti-Covenant combat. Chief checked his MA-5D assault rifle's 7.62mm armor-piercing rounds that could punch through elite shields and brute armor. Kelly grabbed a shotgun, devastating at close range against grunts and jackals. Fred selected a DMR for precision engagements. And Linda, naturally, took her sniper rifle. Just like old times, Buck commented, loading his weapon. Fighting Covenant. Probably about to die. Saving the galaxy whether anyone appreciates it or not. The galaxy appreciates it, Chief replied. They just don't know it yet. The first Phantom dropship latched onto the Infinity's hull, cutting torches already burning through armor plating. Inside the dropship, a Sangheili major rallied his warriors, a mixed force of elites, grunts, and jackals. Warriors of the Covenant. The major roared in his harsh language. Beyond this hull are the demons who have plagued our fleets for decades. The ones who slaughtered our brothers, who desecrated holy sites, who refused to accept the truth of the great journey. Today we board their greatest vessel and kill every last one of them. For the prophets, for the Covenant, for glory eternal. The boarding hatch blew inward, and Covenant forces poured through into a corridor that was immediately familiar to those who'd fought humans before harsh lighting, angular architecture, and the sound of human weapons being charged. The elites expected resistance. What they got was annihilation. Spartans were waiting in prepared positions, using the corridor's geometry to create a kill zone. The first wave of Covenant forces ran straight into concentrated fire from assault rifles, battle rifles, and squad automatic weapons. Grunts fell by the dozens, their shields unable to stop the sustained kinetic barrage. Jackals raised their arm shields, but the UNSC had learned long ago to shoot for their exposed limbs and feet. An elite major managed to activate his active camouflage and slip past the initial defenses, his energy sword igniting as he lunged toward a Marine position. He never reached it. Kelly 087 appeared from her own active camouflage, moving at speeds the elite couldn't match, and put 3 shotgun blasts through his shields and torso before he could react. Boarding point Alpha secured, Kelly reported. No UNSC casualties. Covenant forces neutralized. But there were 49 other boarding craft, and not all of them faced Spartans. On Deck 17, Marines fought desperately against a boarding party led by Jiral-Hane warriors. The brutes were terrifying in close quarters, massive, powerful, and utterly savage. One of them swung his gravity hammer, and the kinetic pulse sent 3 Marines flying, their bodies broken by the impact. Another charged through small arms fire, his armor absorbing rounds, and grabbed a Marine in his massive hands. The Marine screamed as the brute began to crush him, but before the killing blow could land, a Spartan arrived. Fireteam Majestic's Thorn, his assault rifle barking as he put an entire magazine into the brute's unarmored neck. The creature collapsed, dropping the wounded Marine, and Thorn was already moving to the next target. The battle for the Infinity raged through multiple decks. Simultaneously, humans and Covenant forces locked in the brutal close-quarters combat that had defined 3 decades of war. But unlike isolated UNSC ships that had fallen to boarding actions in the past, the Infinity was built for this. Its corridors were designed to funnel invaders into kill zones. Its defenders were the best humanity had ever produced. And every lesson learned from 30 years of Covenant war was now being applied with ruthless efficiency. On the bridge, Lasky watched casualty reports and tactical displays with the calm focus of a commander who'd learned to process horror without being paralyzed by it. They were winning the boarding actions, but the ship was taking damage. The Covenant fleet was pressing closer, and they were still 9,000 kilometers from the dimensional breach. "Sir, we're receiving transmissions from Imperial vessels," the communications officer reported, confusion evident in his voice. "They're providing covering fire? Several Imperial Star Destroyers are engaging Covenant ships that were moving to flank us." Lasky blinked in surprise. "The Empire is helping us?" "Appears so, sir. Their fire is limited but strategic. They're targeting Covenant vessels that were getting into optimal firing positions against us." On the Chimera's bridge, Thrawn watched the battle unfold with the satisfaction of someone whose strategic analysis had proven correct. The UNSC was indeed attempting to close the breach, and their determination suggested they understood the stakes. By providing limited assistance, the Empire gained valuable intelligence on both forces, demonstrated tactical flexibility, and potentially earned goodwill from an adversary who might prove useful in future. Commander Vanto, ensure our vessels maintain defensive posture, Thrawn ordered. We assist enough to keep the UNSC vessel operational, but not enough to provoke the religious aliens into redirecting their full attention to us. A delicate balance. Sir, what about Lord Vader? He's still on that alien ship, presumed in combat. Shouldn't our priority be his extraction? Thrawn was silent for a moment, considering. Vader was valuable, powerful, and the Emperor's chosen enforcer, but he was also trapped deep inside an enemy capital ship that would require significant force to reach. Force that would compromise the current strategic position. Lord Vader has survived worse, Thrawn said finally. If anyone can fight their way off that vessel, it is he. Our priority remains strategic observation and ensuring the dimensional breach is sealed. Vader's survival, while preferable, is secondary to preventing interdimensional catastrophe. It was a cold calculation, and one that could earn Thrawn the Emperor's wrath if Vader died. But it was the correct strategic decision, and Thrawn had not reached his position by allowing sentiment to override tactical necessity. Aboard the Pious Inquisitor, the battle between Vader and Thel had evolved into something approaching mutual respect. Both warriors were wounded. Vader's armor showed scorch marks and dents where energy swords had struck, while Thel's shields had failed entirely, his armor torn in multiple places, blue blood seeping from wounds that would have killed lesser beings. They had been fighting for over an hour, and neither had gained decisive advantage. Vader's force powers gave him edge in strength and precognition, but Thel's speed, skill, and sheer determination kept him in the fight. The corridor around them was littered with bodies, stormtroopers, and Sangheili warriors who had fallen trying to assist their respective leaders. You fight well, demon, Thel said in his own language, though his tone carried respect that transcended linguistic barriers. If you were Sangheili, you would be honored among warriors. Your skill is considerable, Vader admitted, his breathing labored from sustained combat. But you cannot defeat the dark side. None can. He reached out with the Force, trying once more to choke Thel, to crush his throat from within. But the Sangheili's physiology was different from humans. His breathing apparatus was distributed, not centralized, making Force choke less effective. Thel gasped, struggled, but remained conscious and combative. Before either could press advantage, both warriors felt a shift, a change in the battle's rhythm. Through the ship's internal communications, both heard reports of the same thing. The human demon ship was approaching the dimensional breach, attempting to seal it. Thel's eyes widened. They dare? The gateway is holy. They would destroy. They would trap us all here. Vader finished, understanding dawning. For the first time in their duel, both warriors faced a common interest: survival. Vader made a decision that would have surprised those who knew only his reputation for merciless commitment to Imperial objectives. Truce, Vader said, his mechanical voice carrying weight beyond simple vocabulary. Thel's mandibles flared in surprise. What? Vader gestured to the chaos beyond the dimensional breach visible through the ship's viewports, the infinity drawing closer, and the energy readings that even Covenant sensors could detect building toward catastrophic levels. The humans attempt to seal the breach. If they succeed, my fleet is stranded in your galaxy, and your fleet is trapped in mine. Neither of us benefits. Vader deactivated his lightsaber. Temporary alliance. We stop the humans. Then we resume our war. Thel stared at this strange warrior who moments ago had been trying to kill him, now proposing alliance. It violated every strategic principle, defied common sense, and was probably a trap. But it was also the only way either of them survived. Thel deactivated his energy swords. Temporary alliance. We stop the humans. Then I kill you properly. You may try, Vader replied. And with that impossible accord, the Dark Lord of the Sith and the Supreme Commander of the Covenant turned their combined attention to the UNSC Infinity. The battle was about to enter its final phase, and reality itself was about to break. The dimensional breach pulsed with building instability, its edges flickering between existence and non-existence as reality struggled to maintain coherence. Doctor, Glassman watched the readings with mounting horror, his hands flying across holographic controls as he attempted calculations that made his head hurt. Commander, the breach is expanding exponentially. Glassman reported over the comm, his voice tight with panic. Every ship that passes through, every weapon fired near it, every energy spike, it's all feeding the instability. At current rate of expansion, the breach will reach critical mass in 47 minutes. After that, it won't just connect two universes, it'll start tearing holes across multiple dimensions simultaneously. On the bridge, Lasky absorbed this information with the calm of someone already committed beyond the point of second guessing. What happens if it reaches critical mass? Best case? Localized dimensional collapse that destroys everything within 10 light years. Worst case? Cascading dimensional failures that tear apart the fabric of space-time across both galaxies. We're talking extinction-level event on a scale that makes the Halo array look gentle. Then we seal it before that happens, Lasky said simply. How close do we need to be? Within 2 kilometers. We'll need to position the Infinity directly at the breach's threshold, overload the slipspace drive in a controlled cascade, and use the resulting energy pulse to collapse the dimensional weakness. It'll work like using a shaped charge to collapse a tunnel. But Commander, the energy release will be catastrophic. Anyone within 5,000 kilometers, when that drive blows, will be atomized. Including us, Lasky finished. Glassman's silence confirmed it. Master Chief, standing at the tactical station, spoke quietly. Sir, there might be another way. If we evacuate the Infinity's crew to life pods before the drive overload, set automated systems to position the ship and trigger the collapse, most of the crew could survive, and leave humanity's most advanced warship in automated control during the most complex maneuver we've ever attempted? Lasky shook his head. No. This requires human judgment, human reflexes. We stay until the job is done, then we evacuate. If there's time. Sir Chief began. That's an order, Master Chief, Lasky said, his tone brooking no argument. I'm not asking anyone to die unnecessarily, but I am asking them to do their duty, even if that means accepting calculated risk. You, of all people, should understand that. Chief was silent for a moment, then nodded. He understood perfectly. It was the same calculation he'd made dozens of times, mission first, survival second. Some things were worth dying for. Distance to breach. 7,000 kilometers. Navigation reported. Covenant fleet is pursuing at maximum speed. Imperial forces are maintaining defensive position but not advancing. Wait new contacts. Multiple Covenant vessels are breaking from the main fleet and accelerating ahead of us. On the tactical display, 6 Covenant cruisers and a Cass-class assault carrier burned hard toward the breach, their plasma drives pushing them to velocities that stress their structural integrity. They were racing to reach the dimensional gateway before the Infinity could seal it. They're going to try to hold the breach open, Palmer realized. Position their ships as anchors, so we can't collapse it. Aboard the Pious Inquisitor, now racing ahead of the Covenant main fleet, Thel Vadam stood on his bridge beside Darth Vader, both warriors united by temporary necessity that would have been unthinkable hours earlier. Usay Taham coordinated the ship's helm with other vessels, creating a defensive formation around the breach. Human vessels' velocity and trajectory confirmed, Usay reported. They will reach optimal position for breach collapse in approximately 8 minutes. Our ships are positioning now to prevent their approach. These humans are persistent, Thel observed, mandibles clicking with grudging respect. They would destroy their own escape route to prevent dimensional catastrophe. Honorable in a way, even if misguided. Honor is irrelevant, Vader replied, his breathing apparatus cycling. Only power matters. And I will not be trapped in this galaxy because humans decided to play hero. Through the Force, Vader could feel the dimensional breach, a wound in reality that screamed with wrongness. It violated the natural order, defied the carefully balanced laws that governed existence. Part of him understood why the humans wanted it closed. But that understanding did not override his determination to use the breach for the Empire's benefit. When we engage the human vessel, concentrate fire on their propulsion systems, Vader commanded. Disable them, don't destroy them. The Emperor wants their technology intact if possible. The hierarchs want their vessel destroyed and all humans aboard killed, Thel countered. That is non-negotiable. Vader turned his masked face toward the Sangheili commander. Then we have conflicting objectives. But first, we stop them from reaching the breach. We can discuss who gets to kill them afterwards. It was not a perfect alliance, but it was functional. Both warriors understood that immediately after the human threat was neutralized, they would likely resume trying to kill each other. But for now, necessity created strange partnerships. The Pious Inquisitor and its escort vessels took up defensive positions around the dimensional breach, their plasma weapons charging, their shields at maximum. Behind them, the rest of the Covenant fleet spread out to cut off the Infinity's escape routes. Human vessel approaching optimal firing range, USA reported. All weapons charged and ready. Fire, Thel commanded. The Covenant defensive formation unleashed concentrated plasma fire, dozens of torpedoes and pulse laser beams converging on the Infinity from multiple angles. The UNSC ship's shields flared brilliant white under the assault, and damage warnings screamed across every deck. Shields at 62%, Tactical reported. Hull breaches on decks 7, 9, and 11. We're taking heavy damage. Evasive maneuvers, Lasky ordered. Tactical, I need firing solutions on those cruisers blocking our path. MAC guns, prepare full spread. We're going through them. Sir, if we fire MAC guns at this range with this many targets, we'll expend most of our kinetic ammunition, the weapons officer cautioned. We won't have reserves for? We won't need reserves, Lasky interrupted. After we seal that breach, either we've won or we're dead. Either way, ammunition conservation is irrelevant. Fire all MAC guns. Clear us a path. The Infinity's Series 8 MAC guns fired in rapid sequence, 8 tungsten rounds launched at 30 kilometers per second, each one carrying kinetic energy equivalent to a tactical nuclear weapon. The rounds crossed space almost instantaneously, and the Covenant defensive formation learned why humanity had survived 30 years of war despite being technologically inferior. 2 cruisers simply exploded, their shields and hulls unable to withstand the kinetic impacts. A third took a glancing hit that sheared away its entire starboard side, sending it tumbling. The assault carrier, Resplendent Fervor, took a direct hit to its bow. The round punched through the shields, penetrated 200 meters of hull plating, and exited the stern, leaving a perfectly cylindrical hole through the entire ship. Atmosphere, debris, and bodies vented from the wound, and the carrier's systems struggled to seal bulkheads and prevent catastrophic decompression. Ritae's Vadam felt his ship shudder beneath him, felt warriors die by the hundreds as entire sections were exposed to vacuum. Damage report, Urtas roared, his damaged mandibles clicking with fury. We are venting atmosphere from 14 sections. Plasma conduits ruptured. Casualty count over 800 and climbing. His operations officer reported. Shipmaster, we must withdraw or the vessel will be lost. Never, Urtas snarled. Seal what you can, sacrifice what you must. But this ship holds position. The gods themselves command it. Aboard the Pious Inquisitor, Thel watched 2 of his escort vessels die and his commander's ship crippled in seconds. The humans' kinetic weapons were even more devastating than intelligence reports had suggested. This was how humanity had survived the Covenant War, not through superior technology or numbers, but through brutal pragmatism and weapons that simply ignored conventional defensive measures. All remaining ships, spread formation, Thel commanded. Do not cluster, make yourselves difficult targets. Concentrate fire on their forward sections. Disable their weapons before they can fire again. The remaining Covenant vessels adjusted positions, plasma weapons tracking the Infinity's vulnerable points. But the UNSC ship was already moving, its helm officer executing evasive maneuvers that would have been impossible for a vessel its size if not for the enhanced maneuvering thrusters and the skill of those controlling them. Plasma torpedoes streaked past where the Infinity had been seconds before, impacting empty space or asteroid debris. Return fire came from the Infinity's point defense systems and Archer missile pods, hundreds of smaller missiles that scattered across the battlefield, forcing Covenant ships to choose between maintaining position or evading. Distance to breach, 4,000 kilometers, navigation reported. Time to optimal position, 4 minutes. On the Chimera, Grand Admiral Thrawn watched the desperate battle unfold with analytical detachment. The mathematics were brutal. The UNSC vessel was outgunned, outnumbered, and taking cumulative damage that would eventually prove fatal. But they pressed forward with determination that suggested they had accepted death as probable outcome. Admirable, Thrawn murmured. They understand strategic necessity and accept personal sacrifice to achieve it. A rare quality in any military force. Sir, should we increase our covering fire? Commander Vanto asked. If the UNSC vessel is destroyed before reaching the breach, the aliens will have unrestricted access to our galaxy. A valid concern, Thrawn agreed. But observe, the alien religious forces are concentrated around the breach, leaving their flanks exposed. And notice the energy readings from the breach itself. Dr. Kaslow, analysis? The Chimera's chief scientist, a human woman with gray-streaked hair, studied her displays with furrowed brow. Admiral, the dimensional instability is increasing exponentially. The UNSC is correct. If that breach isn't sealed soon, the resulting cascade failure will be catastrophic. However, she zoomed in on specific energy patterns. The collapse won't be instantaneous. There will be approximately 30 seconds between the initiation of the collapse sequence and final closure. Any vessel close enough to the breach during that window could potentially transit to the other universe before the gateway seals. Thrawn's red eyes gleamed. Interesting. So the UNSC's attempt to close the breach creates a narrow window of opportunity for transit. Commander Vanto, adjust our position. Move the Chimera closer to the breach, but maintain distance that appears non-threatening. If an opportunity for reconnaissance transit presents itself, I intend to seize it. Sir, that's incredibly dangerous, which is precisely why the aliens won't expect it, Thrawn finished. Execute the order, Commander. Aboard the Infinity, Master Chief and Blue Team had repelled the last Covenant boarding party and were moving through damaged sections, assisting Marines and damage control teams. Bodies lay throughout the corridors, both human and Covenant, testament to the brutal close-quarters fighting that had raged for the past hour. Chief, we've got wounded in Section 14, Kelly reported over the team channel. Multiple Marines, some critical. Medical teams are stretched thin. Assist them, Chief ordered. Fred, Linda, sweep the port side. Make sure no Covenant forces are hiding in damaged sections. We can't afford surprises when we reach the breach. As his team dispersed to their assignments, Chief made his way to the engineering section where Dr. Glassman worked frantically on the slipspace drive modifications. The scientist looked exhausted, his face pale and drawn, but his hands remained steady as he manipulated the holographic controls. Doctor, status? Chief asked. Glassman didn't look up. 90 seconds from completion. The drive is primed for overload. The resonance cascade is programmed, and I've quadruple-checked the calculations. It'll work, Chief. When we trigger this, the breach will collapse. But, he finally looked up, meeting Chief's visor. Everyone within 5,000 kilometers dies. That includes us, the Covenant ships blocking our path. Maybe even some of the Imperial forces if they're too close. We're talking about detonating a dimensional bomb. Acceptable casualties, Chief said quietly. Given the alternative. Millions dead if the breach cascades, Glassman agreed. Thousands dead if we close it. Cold mathematics say we're making the right call. Doesn't make it easier to push the button though. No, Chief agreed. It doesn't. But it's still the right call. On the bridge, alarms wailed as another plasma salvo struck the Infinity shields. The ship shuddered, and new damage reports flooded in. They were 3,000 kilometers from optimal position, taking heavy fire, and their shields were down to 40%. Sir, we won't make it, the tactical officer said quietly. The Covenant fire is too concentrated. Our shields will fail before we reach position. Lasky studied the tactical display, running calculations in his head. The officer was right at current rate of shield degradation. They'd be vulnerable before reaching the breach. But there was another option. One that violated every doctrine about preserving capital ships, but might achieve the mission objective. Helm, emergency acceleration, Lasky ordered. Divert all power from weapons, life support, and non-essential systems to engines and shields. We're going to ram through their formation. "Sir?" the helm officer questioned, uncertainty in his voice. "You heard me. Full acceleration. We don't need weapons anymore. The slipspace overload is our weapon now. All that matters is reaching position. If we have to go through Covenant ships to do it, then that's what we do." The Infinity's engines flared to maximum output, the massive warship accelerating to velocities that strained its structural integrity. Warning alarms screamed about stress fractures and overheating systems. But the ship surged forward, shields reinforced with every erg of available power. Aboard the Pious Inquisitor, Usei Taham watched the human ship's acceleration with alarm. "Commander, the demon ship is accelerating directly toward us. Impact in 45 seconds. Evasive maneuvers," Thel commanded. "All ships, scatter. Do not let them." But the Pious Inquisitor was too large, too close, and had too much momentum. The Infinity bore down on it like a hammer of the gods. And Thel realized with horrifying clarity that the humans weren't trying to disable his ship, they were trying to destroy it through sheer kinetic impact. "Brace for collision," Thel roared. "All hands." The Infinity struck the Pious Inquisitor at a relative velocity of 300 kilometers per second. The Covenant cruiser's shields flared brilliant white, held for a microsecond, then collapsed under the impossible kinetic energy. The Infinity's reinforced bow plating met the Pious Inquisitor's hull, and physics took over. The smaller vessel was crushed, torn apart by forces that exceeded its structural tolerances by orders of magnitude. Inside the Infinity, inertial dampeners screamed at overload, barely keeping the crew alive as the ship shuddered with the impact. Hull plating buckled, internal bulkheads collapsed, and entire sections were crushed by the force of collision. Emergency systems struggled to maintain atmosphere and gravity as power fluctuated wildly. But the Infinity's Forerunner enhanced structural integrity held. The massive supercarrier punched through the Covenant cruiser like a bullet through paper, emerging on the other side, trailing debris and venting atmosphere from dozens of hull breaches. Thel, Vadim, caught in the moment of his ship's destruction, had only seconds to react. He activated his emergency combat harness, felt the protective energy field envelop him, and then the deck exploded beneath his feet. He was thrown into space, tumbling through the void, watching his ship his command, his home break apart around him, and beside him, also ejected from the wreckage, was Darth Vader. The Sith Lord's armor was breached in multiple places, his breathing apparatus damaged but still functional. Through the Force, he stabilized his trajectory, preventing himself from tumbling, and reached out to Thel, grabbing the Sangheili with telekinetic power before the warrior could drift too far. Two enemies, united by temporary truce, now floating in space amid the debris of a destroyed ship, watching as the Infinity damaged but operational continued toward the dimensional breach. "Your ship sacrificed itself to clear our path," Thel said over emergency comms, his voice carrying grudging respect. "Humans are more fanatical than we believed." "They are desperate," Vader corrected, his mechanical breathing labored. "And desperation makes even weak beings dangerous." He activated his emergency beacon. "My fleet will retrieve us, but we have failed. The humans will reach the breach." The Infinity, trailing atmosphere and debris, its shields failed and its hull compromised in dozens of places, closed the final distance to the dimensional breach. 2,000 kilometers. 1,500. "Dr. Glassman, activate the cascade," Lasky ordered. "All hands, abandon ship. Emergency evacuation protocols. Everyone to escape pods now." "Commander, you need to evacuate," Palmer insisted, grabbing Lasky's arm. "The command crew needs to." "Negative," Lasky said firmly. "Automated systems can't handle this. We stay until the breach collapses. That's final. Now get to your post and prepare for evacuation after the mission is complete." Throughout the ship, crew scrambled for escape pods, pulling wounded with them, carrying those who couldn't move on their own. Spartans helped Marines, engineers assisted scientists, and in the chaos of potential death, humanity showed what it was capable of when survival depended on cooperation. Master Chief made his way to the bridge, his armor scarred from combat, his shields depleted. He arrived just as the Infinity reached optimal position, 2 kilometers from the dimensional breach, energy readings spiking toward critical levels. "Chief," Lasky said, not looking away from the tactical display. "You should evacuate. You've done enough." "Spartans don't abandon their ship," Chief replied simply, taking position at the tactical station. "I stay until you do, sir." Lasky smiled slightly. "Stubborn as always. All right then. Let's finish this." Dr. Glassman's voice came over the comm, tight with tension. "Cascade sequence activated. Resonance building. We're at point of no return. The drive will overload in 90 seconds, whether we want it to or not. Everyone get to escape pods." The Infinity's slipspace drive began to scream, an audible shriek of stressed exotic matter and failing containment fields. Purple-white energy crackled along the ship's hull, arcing toward the dimensional breach like lightning seeking ground. And the breach responded. It convulsed, contracted, then expanded violently as competing energies fought for dominance. The Infinity's overloading drive wanted to collapse the dimensional weakness. The breach itself, fed by weeks of energy bombardment and ship transits, wanted to expand. Reality itself became a battleground between order and chaos. "Cascade at 60%, Glassman reported. "Breach is resisting. Commander, it's fighting back. This thing is almost alive. I don't know if we can." The breach exploded outward. Dimensional energy washed over the Infinity in a wave of impossible colors and sensations that made every crew member scream as their senses reported information human brains weren't designed to process. For a moment, an eternal moment, they existed in all dimensions simultaneously, seeing every possible timeline, every alternate reality, every version of themselves that had ever been or could ever be. And in that moment, they understood. The breach wasn't just a wound in space-time. It was a crack in the foundation of reality itself, spreading like fractures in glass, threatening to shatter existence across every dimension that had ever existed. "Push through!" Lasky roared, though his voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "Glassman, maximum power. Collapse it now." The slipspace drive reached critical mass, and the universe screamed. The slipspace drive detonated in a cascade of exotic particles and dimensional energy that rewrote the laws of physics within a 5,000-kilometer radius. The explosion was not fire or plasma, it was reality itself convulsing, contracting, folding inward as the Infinity's sacrifice created a gravitational singularity in dimensional space. Every ship caught within the blast radius simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, but erased. Their matter converted to pure energy that fed the dimensional collapse. Covenant cruisers, Imperial patrol craft, fighters from both sides, all of them vanished in an instant of blinding purple-white radiance that burned retinal afterimages into anyone who witnessed it from a distance. The dimensional breach, fed by this catastrophic energy release, first expanded to 3 times its original size, a gaping maw in reality that threatened to swallow nearby star systems. For 5 eternal seconds, it seemed the Infinity's sacrifice had failed, that instead of closing the breach, they had doomed both universes to cascading dimensional collapse. Then the resonance cascade reached critical harmonics. The breach contracted violently, collapsing inward like a star going supernova in reverse. Dimensional barriers that had been torn apart began to reassert themselves, reality's fundamental laws re-establishing dominance over the chaos. The swirling vortex of impossible colors shrank, compressed, contracted down from kilometers to meters to centimeters. And then, with a final flash of light that could be seen across half the sector, the breach sealed. Silence. Space itself seemed to hold its breath, shocked by the violence that had just occurred. Debris floated in slowly expanding clouds, fragments of ships, droplets of frozen atmosphere, bodies of those who hadn't made it to escape pods. The dimensional scar remained visible, a faint shimmer in space where reality had been stitched back together, but the gateway between universes was closed. The Infinity was gone. Where the massive supercarrier had positioned itself, there was now only a debris field spreading outward from a central point of absolute destruction. Escape pods floated throughout the area, their emergency beacons screaming for rescue. Aboard one of those pods, Commander Thomas Lasky floated in zero gravity, his body bruised and his mind reeling from what they'd experienced during those final moments of dimensional overlap. Around him in the cramped space were members of his bridge crew, 12 people who'd stayed at their posts until the last possible second, then sprinted for the nearest escape pod. "Sound off," Lasky croaked, his throat raw. "Everyone still with me?" One by one, his crew responded. All 12 had survived the evacuation, though several were injured. Outside the pod's small viewport, Lasky could see other escape pods, hundreds of them, scattered across thousands of kilometers. "Did it work?" Lieutenant Commander Bradley asked, his face pale. "Is the breach closed?" Lasky looked toward where the dimensional gateway had been. The shimmer was faint but visible. Reality scarred but intact. "It's closed. We did it." A cheer went up in the cramped pod. Exhausted laughter and tears of relief mixing together. They'd survived. Against impossible odds, they'd accomplished the mission and lived to tell about it. But Lasky's relief was tempered by loss. The Infinity, humanity's greatest achievement, the culmination of centuries of technological advancement, the ship that had been his command and his home was gone. 30,000 crew, reduced to scattered survivors in emergency pods. And somewhere out there, both the Empire and the Covenant were deciding what to do with those survivors. In another escape pod, Master Chief helped a wounded Marine into a more comfortable position before checking on his team. Blue Team had made it out. Kelly, Fred, and Linda were all accounted for, their armor's emergency systems keeping them alive despite the catastrophic evacuation. "Mission status?" Fred asked, his professional composure masking the exhaustion Chief could hear in his voice. "Breach sealed," Chief confirmed. "Infinity destroyed. Crew scattered in escape pods. Current tactical situation, extremely unfavorable." "So, same as always," Kelly quipped weakly. "At least we're consistent." Through the pod's viewport, Chief could see the Covenant fleet regrouping, their ships pulling back from the dimensional collapse zone, assessing damage and reforming battle lines. And in the distance, Imperial Star Destroyers were doing the same, their white-gray hulls damaged but operational. Both fleets had taken significant casualties. The dimensional breach's final expansion had caught ships from both sides, erasing them from existence. The Covenant had lost 18 capital ships and over 300 fighters. The Empire had lost 2 Star Destroyers and 4 support cruisers. Both sides were bloodied. Both were diminished. But both were still far more powerful than a scattered collection of escape pods full of exhausted UNSC personnel. "They're going to come for us," Linda observed quietly from her position by the viewport. "Both of them. We're defenseless out here." "Then we prepare to be picked up," Chief said, "and hope we get picked up by someone who follows prisoner of war conventions." Aboard the assault carrier consecrated Resolve, now serving as the Covenant fleet's command vessel after the Pious Inquisitor's destruction, Shipmaster Artas Vadum assessed the situation with his remaining eye. His own ship, the Resplendent Fervor, was under emergency repair, barely maintaining structural integrity after the human weapon had punctured it bow to stern. "Status of the dimensional gateway?" Artas demanded, his scarred mandibles clicking with barely contained fury. "Sealed, Shipmaster," his sensor operator reported. "The human sacrifice collapsed the breach. We are trapped in this galaxy with no clear route home. And the humans?" He highlighted the escape pods on the tactical display. "They survived. Hundreds of pods scattered across the battle space." RTA studied the display, his warrior's mind calculating options. The humans had destroyed their own vessel to seal the breach, an act of selfless sacrifice that even Sanghaili culture respected. They were now helpless, at the mercy of whoever chose to claim them, and the Empire was already moving to do exactly that. "Shipmaster, Imperial vessels are deploying recovery craft," the tactical officer reported. "They're moving to collect the human survivors." Before Rites could respond, communications crackled with an incoming transmission heavily encrypted, originating from High Charity. The face that appeared was ancient and calculating, the prophet of truth. Shipmaster Vadum, Truth's reedy voice carried across the light years. "I have reviewed the battle reports. The humans sacrificed their vessel to seal our access to their home space. Admirable, if strategically foolish. But our mission remains unchanged. Humanity must be destroyed. And these survivors are the perfect opportunity to demonstrate Covenant resolve. Holy Hierarch, Rada said carefully. The humans are defenseless. To slaughter prisoners would violate warrior codes of honor. Honor is for those who can afford it, Truth interrupted. The great journey demands the elimination of humanity. These survivors are not prisoners, they are heretics who defied the will of the gods. Destroy their escape pods. All of them. Leave none alive. RDAS felt his blood run cold. He had fought humans for decades, killed thousands, burned their colonies, and watched their civilizations fall. But he was saying highly, honor meant everything. To murder helpless survivors in escape pods was not warfare. It was butchery. Hierarch, with respect. This is not a request, Shipmaster. It is a command from the hierarchs themselves. Destroy the humans, or I will find someone who will. The prophets have spoken. The transmission cut out. And Arteas stood in silence, mandibles tight with internal conflict. Behind him, his bridge crew waited for orders, their expressions reflecting the same moral uncertainty their commander felt. Shipmaster, his weapons officer prompted quietly. Your orders? RTA stared at the tactical display, at the hundreds of human escape pods drifting helplessly through space. He thought about honor, about warrior codes, about the difference between fighting enemies and murdering the helpless. And he thought about the prophet's command, backed by absolute religious authority. Power weapons, Rate said finally, his voice heavy with something that might have been regret. Target the escape pods. Prepare to... Shipmaster, Imperial vessels are launching a broad-spectrum communication, the communications officer interrupted. They're broadcasting on all frequencies, including ours. Patching through now. The holographic display shifted to show Grand Admiral Thrawn standing on the bridge of the Chimera, his red eyes steady, and his expression calm despite the chaos of the recent battle. Attention Covenant forces, Thrawn said in perfect, if oddly accented. Sanghaili, his linguistic analyst, had been working throughout the battle, decoding the alien language. I am Grand Admiral Thrawn of the Galactic Empire. The human survivors you see scattered before us are under Imperial protection. Any attempt to harm them will be considered an act of war against the Empire. I strongly suggest you reconsider whatever actions your leadership has commanded. RTAS's remaining eye widened. The Empire was protecting the humans? The same humans who had fought them, humiliated them, and allied with their rebellion? This is unexpected, Usei Taham muttered from his station. It is strategic, Ritaz corrected, understanding dawning. The Empire wants the human technology, their knowledge of the dimensional breach, their intelligence on us. Of course they would claim the survivors. He opened a return channel, speaking in Sanghaili but with translation systems engaged. Imperial Commander, the humans are sworn enemies of the Covenant. We have pursued them across galaxies. Your protection means nothing to us. Stand aside, or we will go through you to complete our holy mission. Thrawn's expression didn't change, but something in his red eyes suggested he'd expected exactly this response. Shipmaster, I recognize your dedication to your cause, but I would ask you to consider the tactical reality. Your fleet has been reduced by over 30%. Your command ship is destroyed. Your commander missing, possibly dead. You are trapped in a galaxy you do not understand, with no reinforcements and no supply lines. He gestured to something off-screen, and the tactical display updated to show a horrifying sight. More Imperial vessels arriving via hyperspace. 3 more Star Destroyers, 2 Interdictors, and a fleet of support craft. I, however, have reinforcements arriving every hour. Thrawn continued calmly. I have supply depots throughout this galaxy. I have allies, intelligence networks, and the resources of an empire that spans 1,000,000 worlds. If you engage us now, over the corpses of helpless humans, you will lose. And your fleet will be destroyed far from home. Your warriors' sacrifices wasted, and your holy mission failed. It was not a threat. It was a mathematical certainty, presented with the calm efficiency of someone who'd calculated the odds and found them overwhelmingly in his favor. Ritias felt rage building in his chest, not at Thrawn's words, but at the prophet who had commanded him to commit dishonorable murder that would now also result in tactical suicide. Truth had sent them here with insufficient forces, trapped them in an alien galaxy, and now demanded they throw away what remained in pointless slaughter. I offer you an alternative, Thrawn continued. Withdraw your forces. Return to your territory and consolidate your position while you determine how to return to your home galaxy. We will collect the human survivors, and you will not interfere. In exchange, I will not pursue your damaged vessels. Both our forces will disengage, and we will have opportunity to consider our situations without further bloodshed. And if we refuse? Taze challenged. Then I will destroy your fleet, Thrawn said simply. Not because I want to, but because tactical necessity demands it. Your choice, shipmaster. Honorable withdrawal or pointless death. Choose quickly, my reinforcements are eager to engage if necessary. On High Charity, the prophet of truth watched this exchange with fury that made his ancient body tremble. The Imperial commander had outmaneuvered him, turned a situation where the Covenant held tactical advantage into one where they faced certain destruction. Send word to Vadam. Truth commanded his communications staff. He is to, begging the hierarch's pardon. One of the junior prophets interrupted carefully. But our communication relay to the fleet is experiencing technical difficulties. It may be some time before we can re-establish contact. Truth turned his one good eye on the junior prophet, recognizing the lie for what it was. The communication systems were fine, but the junior prophet, like many in the Covenant hierarchy, was unwilling to send warriors to pointless death for pride alone. I see, Truth said slowly. How unfortunate. Continue attempting to restore communications. At once, hierarch. Back on the consecrated resolve, Erdias made his decision. He could follow the prophet's command, engage the Empire, and die honorably, but uselessly. Or he could exercise command discretion, preserve his warriors, and face the political consequences later. All ships, RTAs, transmitted across the Covenant fleet. We are withdrawing to safe distance. Maintain defensive posture but do not engage Imperial forces. We will regroup and assess our situation. Relief was palpable across his bridge. Warriors who'd been preparing to die found themselves given unexpected reprieve. They would live to fight another day. And perhaps that day's fight would have more honor than murdering helpless prisoners. As the Covenant fleet pulled back, Imperial recovery ships moved among the escape pods, tractoring them aboard and collecting the UNSC survivors. In total, they recovered 738 escape pods containing 21,000 survivors, roughly 70% of the Infinity's crew. The rest had been lost when the ship was destroyed or caught in sections that couldn't be evacuated. Master Chief's pod was among the first collected, pulled aboard a Gozani-class cruiser that had been repurposed for rescue operations. As the pod's hatch opened and Imperial Navy troopers gestured for the occupants to exit, Chief took point. His armor's weapons systems disabled, but his presence alone enough to make the troopers hesitate. Easy, one of the troopers said, his voice muffled behind his helmet. We're here to collect you, not fight you. Admiral's orders, you're being treated as shipwrecked personnel under military convention, not as prisoners of war. Chief studied the trooper, his armor sensors detecting no hostile intent, no weapons being charged. Where are you taking us? Medical frigate Perseverance. You'll be processed, injuries treated, and held in what amounts to protective custody until command figures out what to do with you. The trooper's voice carried something that might have been respect. For what it's worth, what you did sacrificing your ship to close that breach, that was some serious brass. You probably saved both our galaxies. We did what was necessary, Chief replied simply, gesturing for Blue Team to follow him out of the pod. As the UNSC survivors were collected and moved to medical facilities, Commander Lasky found himself aboard the Chimera, escorted by stormtroopers to a debriefing room where Grand Admiral Thrawn waited. The Chiss officer stood as Lasky entered, his red eyes studying the human commander with interest that seemed more anthropological than hostile. Commander Lasky, Thrawn said in perfect English, gesturing to a chair. Please, sit. We have much to discuss, and I suspect you are exhausted. Lasky remained standing. I'm a prisoner? You are a guest, Thrawn corrected. An involuntary one? Certainly, but a guest, nonetheless. You and your crew sacrificed your vessel to prevent dimensional catastrophe that would have killed billions. The Empire recognizes the value of such selfless action, even when performed by adversaries. That's not what Vader would have said. Lord Vader operates with different priorities, Thrawn acknowledged. I operate with long-term strategic vision. You are more valuable as potential allies than as enemies, Commander. Much more valuable. Lasky slowly sat, his body finally acknowledging its exhaustion. What do you want? Information, Thrawn said simply. About your technology? Your civilization? Your history with the religious aliens who seek your extinction? About dimensional mechanics and slipspace physics? About everything you learned during your time in our galaxy? He paused. And in exchange, I offer something you desperately need. Protection from the Covenant, medical treatment for your wounded, and time to determine what happens next. You saved us from the Covenant to interrogate us, Lasky said flatly. I saved you from the Covenant because murdering shipwrecked personnel violates civilized rules of warfare, Thrawn replied. The interrogation is simply pragmatic addition. But Commander, let me be clear. This does not make us friends. When this crisis passes, the Empire will still be the Empire, and you will still have allied with our rebellion. But for now, we share common interest in understanding and containing the Covenant threat. Lasky was silent for a moment, processing. The Covenant won't stop. Their religion demands humanity's extinction. As long as that breach was open, they had access to this galaxy. Now that it's closed, they're trapped here, angry, desperate, and probably looking for another way home. Which is precisely why I need to understand them, Thrawn said. Their culture, their technology, their psychological weaknesses. You've fought them for decades. You understand them in ways we do not. Share that understanding, and I can help ensure they never threaten either of our civilizations again. It was a devil's bargain, and Lasky knew it. Share intelligence with the Empire, help them fight the Covenant, and potentially create an even more dangerous empire if they won. But refuse, and the Covenant would rampage through the Star Wars galaxy unchecked, killing billions while the Empire and UNSC survivors stood helplessly by. I'll need to consult with my senior staff, Lasky said finally. Of course, Thrawn agreed. You have 6 hours to recover and discuss among yourselves. Then we will speak again. He stood, preparing to leave, then paused. Commander, one more thing. Your Master Chief, the Spartan warrior who fought Lord Vader to a standstill. I would very much like to speak with him as well. Professional soldier to professional soldier. Lasky nodded slowly. I'll ask him. But Chief makes his own decisions about who he talks to. As it should be, Thrawn said with what might have been a smile. True warriors respect autonomy. I look forward to our continued discussions, Commander Lasky. As Thrawn left, Lasky sat alone in the debriefing room, surrounded by Imperial technology in an alien galaxy, his ship destroyed, his crew scattered, and both the Empire and the Covenant watching his every move. They'd sealed the breach and saved both universes, but the cost had been everything they had. And the war, the real war between three civilizations who should never have met, was only just beginning. In the vacuum of space, two warriors drifted among the debris of the pious Inquisitor, their emergency life support systems keeping them alive while they waited for rescue that might never come. Darth Vader's armor was breached in 3 places, atmosphere slowly leaking from the damage, his breathing apparatus struggling to maintain pressure. Beside him, Del Vadim floated in his combat harness, the Sangheili's energy shields depleted, his armor scorched and dented. They had been enemies an hour ago. They had been temporary allies 30 minutes ago. Now, they were simply 2 survivors clinging to life in the aftermath of a battle that had rewritten the strategic situation for 3 galaxies. Your fleet abandons you, Thel observed, his helmet's translation systems rendering his Sangheili into mechanical English for Vader's benefit. As does mine. We are both expendable, it seems. Vader reached out through the Force, sensing the tactical situation. The Covenant fleet was withdrawing to a safe distance, consolidating their forces. The Imperial fleet was focused on recovery operations, collecting UNSC survivors, not searching for a single Sith Lord floating among debris. And Thrawn's Chimera was conspicuously absent from the search pattern. Grand Admiral Thrawn has made a calculated decision, Vader said, his mechanical breathing labored. My survival is less important than establishing control over the human survivors and their intelligence. A cold, but strategically sound assessment. And the prophets care more about political face than recovering their supreme commander? Thel added bitterly. We are both victims of leaders who value power over loyalty. Through his damaged armor, Vader felt the cold of space beginning to penetrate. His suit's heating systems were failing, his oxygen reserves depleting. He had perhaps 20 minutes before system failure resulted in death. The Sangheili beside him likely had similar limitations. We are going to die out here, Vader stated matter-of-factly. Yes, Thel agreed. A warrior's death, at least. Better than growing old and weak. For a long moment, both warriors simply floated, contemplating mortality in the silent void. Then Vader felt something through the Force, a presence approaching. Not Imperial, not Covenant, something else. A ship emerged from the debris field, small, battered, its hull pitted with age and battle damage. It was a YT-1300 light freighter, the kind favored by smugglers and independent operators who lived on the galaxy's fringes. And on its hull, barely visible under layers of grime, was a name, Millennium Falcon. The freighter maneuvered closer, and through the Force, Vader sensed two presences aboard, one human, one Wookiee. And one of them was familiar. Not someone he knew, but something about the presence resonated with echoes of the Force that Vader hadn't felt since. No. Impossible. The pilots were manifesting Force potential? Here? Now? The Falcon's external speakers crackled to life, and a young human male's voice came through, tinged with bravado masking uncertainty. This is Han Solo of the Millennium Falcon. Looks like you guys could use a ride. Now normally, I don't pick up Imperial dark sorcerers or alien warriors who look like they want to eat me, but my partner here says we can't just leave people floating in space. So here's the deal, you both come aboard, you both behave yourselves, and I'll drop you at the nearest station where you can find your own rides. Try anything funny, and Chewie here will rip your arms off. We clear? Vader would have laughed if his condition permitted it. A smuggler, likely affiliated with the rebellion based on ship type and attitude, was offering to rescue an Imperial Sith Lord and a Covenant commander. The irony was exquisite. We accept, Vader transmitted, his voice barely more than a wheeze. Agreed, Thel added. We will honor temporary truce. The Falcon's cargo ramp extended, and magnetic grapples caught both warriors, pulling them toward the ship. As they were drawn into the cargo hold, Vader caught his first glimpse of their rescuers. A young human male with brown hair and the cocky expression of someone who'd survived by being luckier than he was smart, and a massive Wookiee whose fur was a patchwork of browns and grays. The Wookiee roared something that Vader's damaged translator couldn't decode, but the tone was clear. Behave, or else. Yeah, what he said, Han confirmed. Standing at the top of the cargo ramp with a blaster casually pointed in their general direction. Now, let's get you both stabilized before you leak all over my deck. Chewie, break out the emergency med kit. And keep that bowcaster handy. I don't trust either of these guys farther than I can throw them. As the cargo ramp closed and atmosphere filled the hold, both Vader and Thel collapsed, their emergency systems finally giving out now that they were in a pressurized environment. The last thing Vader saw before unconsciousness claimed him was the young smuggler's face, backlit by the cargo hold's lighting, and a presence in the Force that suggested this nobody pilot was going to be important someday. Then darkness took him. Aboard the medical frigate Perseverance, Dr. Glassman sat in a hospital bed, his body bruised and his mind still processing the fact that he'd survived dimensional collapse. Around him, other Infinity survivors were being treated, broken bones set, burns dressed, psychological trauma addressed by overwhelmed Imperial medical staff who'd never dealt with patients from another universe. A young Imperial medical officer approached, her expression professional but curious. Dr. Glassman, I'm Lieutenant Karath, assigned to your case. How are you feeling? Like I was torn apart and reassembled at the atomic level, Glassman replied honestly. Which, given what happened during that dimensional transition, might be literally true. But I'll live. How's my crew? We've treated 7,832 survivors so far, Karath reported, consulting her datapad. Injuries range from minor to critical, but mortality rate has been surprisingly low. Your emergency evacuation procedures were very efficient. We've had practice, Glassman said darkly, remembering previous battles, previous evacuations, previous times when efficient procedures were all that stood between life and death. Dr. Glassman, Karath continued carefully, I've been instructed to ask if you're willing to speak with our scientists. Grand Admiral Thrawn has authorized limited information exchange regarding the dimensional breach and slipspace mechanics. Your expertise would be invaluable. Glassman studied the young officer, noting the careful phrasing. Not, you must cooperate, but willing to speak. Thrawn was being remarkably civilized about this, treating them as guests rather than prisoners. But that civility was predicated on cooperation. What exactly does Thrawn want to know? Glassman asked. How you created slipspace drives, how they differ from hyperspace, how you detected and sealed the dimensional breach, everything about dimensional mechanics that you're willing to share. Karath paused. He's particularly interested in whether similar breaches could occur naturally and how to prevent them. That, at least, was a legitimate concern. If dimensional barriers could tear spontaneously, every civilization in both galaxies faced existential threat. Glassman could justify sharing that information without compromising UNSC security. I'll talk to your scientists, Glassman decided, but only about dimensional mechanics and breach prevention. Nothing about UNSC military technology, nothing about Earth's location, nothing that could be weaponized against us or used to invade our universe. Agreed, Karath said, seeming relieved. Grand Admiral Thrawn predicted you'd set exactly those boundaries. He's authorized me to tell you he finds them reasonable. In the Perseverance's converted cargo bay that now served as temporary quarters for UNSC personnel, Master Chief convened with the surviving senior staff. Commander Lasky was there via holographic projection from the Chimera. Captain Palmer sat with her arms crossed, her expression stormy. The surviving Spartan commanders, Fred, Kelly, Linda, Locke, and Buck, formed a semicircle around the impromptu command table. Situation assessment. Lasky began without preamble. The Infinity is destroyed. We have 21,000 survivors scattered across multiple Imperial vessels. The dimensional breach is sealed. We're cut off from UNSC space with no way home. The Covenant is trapped in this galaxy and looking for another way back to hunt humanity. And the Empire, through Thrawn, is offering protection in exchange for intelligence cooperation. It's a trap, Palmer said flatly. They're being nice now because we're useful. The moment we're not, we become prisoners or worse. Possibly, Lasky agreed. But consider the alternative. The Covenant won't stop hunting us. They have religious imperative to exterminate humanity, and we just destroyed their only route home. They'll tear this galaxy apart looking for another breach or a way to create one. If we try to survive on our own, we'll be hunted by both the Covenant and eventually the Empire. So we cooperate with the Empire to fight the Covenant, Fred summarized. Even though the Empire is also our enemy. The enemy of my enemy is my uncomfortable temporary ally, Lasky said. At least until the Covenant is contained or eliminated. After that, he shrugged. We figure it out. Master Chief had been silent throughout the discussion, his helmet faceplate reflecting the holographic displays. Now he spoke, his voice carrying the weight of decades of impossible decisions. We've fought the Covenant for 30 years, seen them glass entire planets, kill billions, refuse every attempt at peace because their religion demands human extinction. The Empire is bad, totalitarian, brutal, oppressive. But they can be reasoned with. They have political interests, strategic calculations, self-preservation instincts. The Covenant has none of that. They'll die before they compromise. He paused, letting that sink in. If we have to choose between two bad options, we choose the one that keeps the most people alive. Right now, that's cooperation with Thrawn. We share information about the Covenant, help the Empire contain them, and in the process, we keep our people safe. It's not ideal, but it's the best option we have. And when the Covenant is dealt with, Locke asked, when Thrawn doesn't need us anymore, then we reassess. Chief said simply. We've survived impossible situations before by adapting to changing circumstances. This is just another impossible situation. Lasky nodded slowly. Agreed. I'll inform Thrawn that we're willing to provide intelligence on the Covenant in exchange for protection and autonomy for our personnel. We cooperate, but we're not joining the Empire. We remain UNSC, even if we're stranded in the wrong galaxy. How long until we can find another way home? Buck asked. All eyes turned to Glassman, who joined the meeting via hologram from his hospital bed. The scientist looked exhausted, haunted by what he'd experienced during the dimensional transition. Honestly, years, maybe decades, Glassman said quietly. The dimensional breach was a natural phenomenon amplified by our slipspace drive and the Empire's probing, recreating those conditions deliberately, in a controlled manner that doesn't risk dimensional cascade, that's orders of magnitude more complex than what we just did, and we'd need resources we don't have. Shipyards, materials, time to research and test. The Infinity took 5 years to build with Earth's full industrial capacity. We don't have any of that here. So we're stuck, Kelly said flatly. For the foreseeable future. Yes, Glassman confirmed. I'm sorry. I'll keep working on the problem, but I can't promise anything. The group sat in heavy silence, the weight of their situation settling over them. They were the most advanced military force humanity had ever created, stranded in an alien galaxy, surrounded by enemies, with no way home and no certainty they'd ever see Earth again. Then we make the best of it, Lasky said finally. We survive. We protect our people. We honor the sacrifice of those who died, closing that breach by making sure their deaths meant something. And maybe, just maybe, we make this galaxy a little better than we found it. Hoo-ah, Palmer said quietly, using the old Marine affirmation. Around the table, others echoed it. It wasn't enthusiasm. It wasn't hope. It was simply acknowledgement that they would continue forward because that's what soldiers did. They would survive because they had no other choice. On High Charity, the three prophets convened an emergency session, their gravity thrones forming a triangle as they discussed the catastrophe that had befallen their holy mission. 18 capital ships destroyed, Regret reported. His young face twisted with fury. Over 30,000 warriors dead. Supreme Commander Thel, Vada missing and presumed killed. The dimensional gateway sealed. And we are trapped in a galaxy we do not control, surrounded by heretics who have proven they can match our forces. The humans sacrifice themselves to deny us victory, Mercy observed, his ancient voice thoughtful. Such dedication to collective survival is unusual among species we have encountered. Most civilizations prioritize individual survival over strategic necessity. Irrelevant, Truth declared, his calculating mind already working through the political implications. What matters is that we have failed publicly, dramatically, and with significant cost. The other species within the Covenant will question our leadership. The Sangheili in particular will wonder why we ordered Shipmaster Vadam to slaughter helpless prisoners when such an action would have resulted in tactical disaster. Because you wanted to demonstrate absolute authority, Mercy said quietly. To show that even honor must bow to religious imperative. Truth's single eye fixed on Mercy with cold intensity. Do you question my judgment, brother? I question the wisdom of creating situations where our commanders must choose between honor and obedience. Mercy replied carefully. The Sangheili warrior culture is built on both. Force them to abandon one for the other, and their loyalty becomes complicated. It was as close to direct criticism as one prophet could offer another. Truth's expression darkened, but before he could respond, Regret interjected. This debate is pointless. We are trapped here. Our priority must be finding another route home, or establishing control over enough territory in this galaxy to sustain our fleet and armies. The Empire is vast, but so is the Covenant. We can conquer this galaxy if we must. Can we? Mercy challenged. We number 100 ships. The Empire, based on intercepted communications, numbers tens of thousands. Yes, our technology is superior in many ways, but they have numbers, industrial capacity, and most concerning that Grand Admiral who outmaneuvered us. He understood our psychology, predicted our responses, and neutralized our advantage through pure strategic genius. You counsel surrender? Regret demanded. I counsel wisdom. Mercy corrected. We are religious warriors in an unfamiliar galaxy. Perhaps we should focus less on immediate conquest and more on finding the Forerunner artifacts that surely exist here. If the humans could breach dimensional barriers, perhaps the Forerunners left tools that could do the same. Find those, and we find our way home. Truth considered this, his mind already working through implications. A shift from military aggression to archaeological expedition would reduce immediate conflict with the Empire, give his forces time to repair and resupply, and potentially yield discoveries that would justify the entire disastrous venture. The prophet of mercy speaks wisdom, Truth said finally. We will establish a base of operations in unclaimed space, repair our fleet, and send out expeditions seeking Forerunner technology. The great journey continues, but through different path than originally planned. And the humans? Regret pressed. Do we simply abandon our holy mission to exterminate them? The humans number 20,000 survivors under Imperial protection, Truth said. Attacking them now would be strategic suicide. But circumstances change. Empires fall. Protection is withdrawn. We will be patient. The humans cannot hide forever. And when opportunity presents itself, we will complete what the prophets have decreed. It was a postponement, not an abandonment. And all three hierarchs understood that the war with humanity, the holy crusade that had defined the covenant for 30 years, was now complicated by politics, strategy, and the simple fact that they needed the Empire's tolerance more than they needed human extinction. For now, in the Millennium Falcon's medical bay, a converted storage compartment with basic medical equipment, Darth Vader regained consciousness to find his armor's breaches sealed with improvised patches, his life support system stabilized, and a Wookiee standing guard with a bowcaster aimed casually in his direction. Welcome back to the land of the living, Han Solo said from the doorway, his expression wary but not openly hostile. You've been out for 6 hours. Your alien friend woke up 2 hours ago, and he's been remarkably well behaved. I'm hoping you'll follow his example. Vader sat up slowly, assessing his situation. His armor was damaged but functional. His lightsaber was missing, confiscated. Likely, he was on a ship controlled by apparent rebel sympathizers, with no backup and no immediate means of escape. Under normal circumstances, he would simply kill everyone aboard, take control of the ship, and return to Imperial space. But these were not normal circumstances. The Force was whispering warnings that the young smuggler was more important than he appeared, that hasty violence would have consequences that rippled across timelines, that sometimes survival required patience rather than power. Where is the Sangheili warrior? Vader asked. His voice still labored through damaged breathing apparatus. In the cargo hold, meditating or praying or whatever it is his species does. He promised not to cause trouble if I promised to drop him somewhere he could find his fleet. Same deal I'm offering you. I'll take you both to a neutral station where you can contact your people. But I'm not flying into Imperial or alien territory. I value my ship more than I value being a good Samaritan. You are rebellion, Vader stated. Not a question. I'm a smuggler who happens to know some people who don't like the Empire, Han corrected. But yeah, I've done some work for the rebellion, which makes this whole situation really awkward, since I'm pretty sure you're the guy they tell scary stories about to keep new recruits in line. I am, Vader confirmed. And yet you rescued me. Yeah, well, Chewie has this thing about not letting people die in space if we can help it. Blame him. Han gestured to the Wookiee, who growled something that sounded defensive. Vader studied the young smuggler through the Force, seeing potential that the boy himself didn't recognize. This was someone who would be important, not Force-sensitive, but touched by the Force nonetheless, destined to play a role in events that would shape the galaxy. Killing him would be easy, but it would also potentially disrupt something that the dark side itself seemed to be orchestrating. Take me to a neutral station, Vader said finally. I will contact my forces and arrange extraction. In exchange for this service I will forget that I ever met you, Han Solo. Han blinked in surprise. You're offering to let us go? Just like that? Just like that, Vader confirmed. You saved my life, smuggler. Even Sith Lords understand debt. It was a lie, of course. Vader had every intention of eventually tracking down this smuggler and determining why the Force had orchestrated their meeting. But for now, the lie served his purposes. Huh, Han said, clearly not trusting the offer, but also not seeing much choice. Okay then, we'll drop you and your alien buddy at the Vergesso station. It's neutral territory. Empire, rebellion, and various scum and villainy all use it. You can find transport from there. Acceptable, Vader said. As Han left to return to the cockpit, Vader settled back into meditation, reaching out through the Force to understand the currents that had brought him here. The battle was over. The dimensional breach was sealed. But the war, the real war between Empire, Covenant, Rebellion, and the stranded UNSC was only beginning. And Vader would ensure that when that war concluded, the Empire would stand victorious. No matter how many universes he had to conquer to achieve it, the Prophet of Regret stood alone in his private chamber aboard High Charity, surrounded by holographic displays showing ancient texts and Forerunner glyphs. His young face, young by Prophet standards, at least was illuminated by the blue light of the projections, as he studied records that dated back thousands of years. The Forerunners, the gods who had built the halo arrays, who had transcended physical existence through the Great Journey, who had left behind artifacts of such power that entire civilizations could be built on their scraps. The Covenant had spent millennia seeking their relics, interpreting their wisdom, following the path they had laid out. And now, trapped in an alien galaxy, Regret had found something that changed everything. This cannot be, he whispered, his three-fingered hands trembling as they manipulated the holographic controls. The dimensional breach, it was not random. The Forerunners were here. In this galaxy thousands of years ago. The evidence was fragmentary but undeniable. Deep space scans of the dimensional breach's residual energy signature matched Forerunner slipspace technology. Not exactly the UNSC's crude human variant had triggered the breach, but the underlying dimensional architecture showed signs of ancient manipulation. Someone had weakened the barriers between universes deliberately, creating fault lines that could be exploited. And if the Forerunners had been in this galaxy, they might have left artifacts, might have left installations, might have left the very tools the Covenant needed to complete the great journey and return home. Regret activated his private communication array, bypassing the official hierarchical channels. What he was about to do violated protocol, potentially violated the delicate balance of power between the three prophets. But if he was right, if he could find proof of Forerunner presence in this galaxy, he could elevate his status beyond truth's calculating schemes and mercy's cautious philosophy. This is the Prophet of Regret to all Covenant vessels, he transmitted, his voice carrying religious fervor that years of political maneuvering had somewhat diminished. I am authorizing immediate deep space reconnaissance missions. You are to search for Forerunner energy signatures, architectural patterns, or any evidence of the sacred presence. Priority override Alpha 1. Report all findings directly to me. As his message propagated through the Covenant fleet, Regret stared at the holographic displays and felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Genuine religious awe. They had been brought to this galaxy for a reason. The great journey had not been delayed, it had been redirected. And he would be the one to discover where it led. An abandoned star system 14 light-years from the dimensional breach, a Covenant expedition discovered something impossible. The system's fourth planet was a barren rock, atmosphereless and geologically dead. But on its surface, partially buried by millennia of meteor impacts and dust accumulation, was a structure that made the Sanghaley survey team stop in collective shock. It was Forerunner, unmistakably so. The architecture, elegant curves and impossible angles that seemed to bend light around them. The materials, metals and alloys that resisted scanning and showed no signs of age, despite obvious antiquity. The energy signature faint but detectable. A power source that still functioned after thousands of years of abandonment. Holy ground, whispered the survey team leader, a Sanghaley miner named Zuka Zamami. We walk upon holy ground, blessed by the gods themselves. His team approached the structure reverently, weapons lowered, heads bowed in respect. The entrance was sealed by a barrier of hard-light Forerunner technology that the Covenant had never fully mastered but always recognized. And on that barrier, glyphs glowed with faint luminescence. Glyphs that the Covenant's translators could partially decode. "Warning," Zuka read aloud, his mandibles clicking as he struggled with the archaic symbols. "Quarantine. Containment. Death." He paused, uncertainty crossing his features. The gods left warnings? Why would they? The hard light barrier flickered. Something moved inside the structure. Before Zuka could order his team to retreat, the barrier collapsed entirely, and things emerged from the darkness beyond. Things that had once been Forerunner constructs, advanced AI housed in robotic bodies, but had been corrupted by millennia of isolation and system degradation. They moved with jerky, unnatural motions, their optical sensors glowing red instead of the blue associated with functional Forerunner technology. And when they spoke, their voices were distorted, layered with digital corruption. Biological contamination detected. Initiating sterilization protocols. All organic life forms must be error eliminated to prevent error must prevent spread error. The constructs opened fire with weapons that should not have been functional. Energy beams that carved through Sanghaili shields and armor like they were tissue paper. Zuka's team scattered, returning fire with plasma weapons. But the corrupted constructs kept coming, their damaged programming driving them to fulfill security protocols that no longer made sense. Zuka managed to activate his emergency beacon before an energy beam caught him across the chest, burning through his armor and flesh. His last thought before death claimed him was a prayer that his sacrifice would not be in vain, that the hierarchs would learn what he had discovered. The beacon's distress signal reached the Prophet of Regret 4 hours later. Forerunner installation confirmed. Regret breathed, reading the automated sensor logs that had uploaded before the survey team was destroyed. Active defenses, corrupted AI, and beneath it all he zoomed in on subsurface scans, underground chambers that extend kilometers into the planet's crust. This is not a simple outpost. This is a facility, a research station, a vault of knowledge. He activated fleet communications. This is the Prophet of Regret. I am authorizing military expedition to coordinates transmitted herewith. Supreme Commander Vadum, you will take the consecrated Resolve and 3 escort carriers to the target location. Secure the Forerunner installation at any cost. This is divine mandate. Failure is not acceptable. On the bridge of the consecrated Resolve, Riteus Vadum received the orders with mixed feelings. Another reckless command from a prophet more interested in glory than warrior lives. But the mention of Forerunner installation made the mission significant. If the gods had left knowledge in this galaxy, then perhaps their exile here had purpose. Prepare the fleet, Erdas ordered. We move immediately. And send word to the fleet of Profound Solitude request additional support. If this installation is as significant as the prophet believes, we will need overwhelming force to secure it. What none of them knew was that their emergency beacon, their transmissions, their excitement over the Forerunner discovery, all of it was being monitored by sensors that the Covenant didn't even know existed. Grand Admiral Thrawn stood on the bridge of the Chimaera, studying the intercepted communications with interest that bordered on fascination. His linguistic analysts had been working around the clock, and while their translation was still imperfect, they had decoded enough to understand the critical elements. The religious aliens have found something they consider sacred. Thrawn observed to Commander Vanto, an ancient installation on an abandoned planet. They are mobilizing significant military assets to secure it. Should we intercept them, sir? Vanto asked. No, Thrawn said thoughtfully. We should observe. This installation clearly predates the aliens' presence in our galaxy, which means it is native to our reality, perhaps built by a civilization that existed before the Old Republic, before recorded history. If the aliens can access it, they may unlock technology or knowledge that poses strategic threat. But if we allow them to trigger its defenses and learn from their mistakes, we gain intelligence without risk. He turned to his communications officer. Contact Commander Lasky aboard the Perseverance. Inform him that his expertise is required. And send for the Master Chief. I have questions about ancient technology and how to approach it safely. 20 minutes later, Commander Lasky stood on the Chimaera's bridge, staring at the intercepted Covenant transmissions with growing alarm. Beside him, Master Chief studied the fragmentary images of the Forerunner installation with professional focus. "That's Forerunner," Chief confirmed, his voice carrying certainty. "The architecture, the materials, the energy signature, all of it matches installations we've encountered in our galaxy. But this shouldn't be possible. The Forerunners existed in our universe, not yours. They shouldn't have left structures here. Unless," Thrawn interjected, "dimensional travel is not as recent a phenomenon as we believed. Perhaps ancient civilizations discovered how to breach universal boundaries long before either our species or yours reached the stars. This installation suggests the possibility. Why would the Forerunners build in another universe?" Lasky asked. "Quarantine," Chief said quietly, reading the translated glyphs from the Covenant survey team's final transmission. "That's what the warning said. Quarantine and containment. The Forerunners sealed something dangerous here, in a dimension separate from their home reality, to prevent contamination." Thrawn's red eyes gleamed with understanding. "And the Covenant, in their religious fervor, are about to unseal it." "Fascinating. Commander Lasky, what do you know about Forerunner containment facilities? What might they have imprisoned that required dimensional isolation?" Lasky and Chief exchanged glances, both thinking of the same thing. The same nightmare that had nearly destroyed the galaxy. The same ancient horror that the Forerunners had built the Halo array to contain. "The Flood," Lasky said quietly. "A parasitic organism that consumes sentient life, uses their bodies as hosts, absorbs their intelligence and memories. The Forerunners fought a war against it that lasted centuries, and ultimately required them to sterilize the entire galaxy to stop its spread. If they sealed a flood sample here, in your universe, as a containment measure, then the Covenant is about to release an extinction-level threat," Thrawn finished. "One that will not distinguish between their species, ours, or the humans they seek to exterminate. It will simply consume everything." Chief stepped forward, his armored form radiating urgency. "Admiral, if that installation contains the Flood, the Covenant cannot be allowed to breach it. We need to stop them. Immediately. Whatever political considerations exist between your empire and the Covenant, they become irrelevant if the Flood is released." Thrawn studied the Spartan with analytical interest. "You speak with certainty born of experience. You have fought this Flood before." "Multiple times," Chief confirmed, "and barely survived each encounter. The Flood doesn't negotiate. It doesn't retreat. It consumes, adapts, and spreads. A single infection form can start an outbreak that destroys entire planets within weeks. And Forerunner installations often contain samples in the millions. Then we have strategic alignment," Thrawn decided. "Commander Lasky, I am authorizing joint operation between Imperial forces and your personnel. You will provide expertise on Forerunner technology and containment protocols. We will provide military support and transportation. Together, we will ensure that installation remains sealed, even if it means destroying the Covenant force attempting to breach it." "You're asking us to fight alongside the Empire," Lasky said carefully. "To kill Covenant forces to protect your galaxy." "I am asking you to prevent apocalypse," Thrawn corrected. "The enemy of all life is not the Empire, not the Covenant, not even the existential threat each of our civilizations poses to the others. The enemy is the parasitic horror your people call the Flood. Everything else, every political consideration, every strategic calculation becomes meaningless if that organism is released." Lasky was silent for a moment, then nodded. "Agreed. But we command our own forces. UNSC personnel operate under UNSC rules of engagement. We cooperate. But we don't integrate into Imperial command structure." "Acceptable," Thrawn said. "Assemble your teams, Commander. We depart in 2 hours." "And Master Chief," the Admiral fixed his red eyes on the Spartan, "I will need you to train Imperial forces on fighting techniques specific to this Flood organism. My soldiers are skilled, but they have never faced enemy that turns their own dead into weapons." "Understood," Chief replied. "But Admiral, you need to understand something. If we get there too late, if the Covenant has already breached containment, there's only one way to stop a Flood outbreak before it spreads beyond the planet. Which is? We glass the entire surface from orbit. superheated until nothing organic remains. It's what the Covenant does to human colonies. And if the flood is loose, we'll have to do it to them. Thrawn absorbed this without visible reaction. Total sterilization. Extreme, but logical if the alternative is galactic extinction. Very well. I will prepare planetary bombardment protocols. Let us hope the Covenant's religious enthusiasm has not yet achieved catastrophic breakthrough. As Lasky and Chief left to gather their forces, Thrawn stood alone on the bridge, contemplating the shifting strategic landscape. A week ago, he had been chasing unknown vessels and studying new adversaries. Now he was preparing for joint operations with those same adversaries to prevent the release of a parasitic nightmare from another universe. The galaxy, it seemed, had a remarkable capacity for becoming more complicated just when one thought they understood it. "Commander Vanto," Thrawn said quietly, "prepare the fleet for immediate departure. And send word to Emperor Palpatine he should be informed that we are engaging in temporary alliance with UNSC forces to prevent biological threat. Frame it as pragmatic necessity, not ideological shift." "Sir, the Emperor may not approve of cooperation with—" "The Emperor will approve of survival," Thrawn interrupted. "And he will recognize that sometimes survival requires unexpected alliances. Execute the order, Commander. We have very little time." On High Charity, the Prophet of Truth received Regret's report about the Forerunner installation with interest that quickly turned to alarm when he read the full sensor logs. The installation's subsurface chambers, the active defensive systems, the containment warnings. "Regret? You fool," Truth whispered to himself, his political instincts recognizing disaster before it unfolded. "You see divine purpose where there is only divine warning." The Forerunner sealed something there, something they did not want disturbed. He activated his private communication array, reaching out to contacts that existed outside official hierarchical channels. "This is the Prophet of Truth to Shadow Fleet. You are to proceed to the coordinates I am transmitting and observe the Prophet of Regret's expedition. Do not engage unless absolutely necessary, but document everything. If Regret has stumbled into catastrophe, I want evidence that it was his error, not hierarchical policy." The Shadow Fleet, a secret formation of ships that answered directly to Truth, existing outside standard Covenant military structure, received the orders and moved silently through slipspace. Shadows within shadows, preparing to witness whatever disaster Regret was about to unleash. And on the barren planet, deep within the sealed Forerunner installation, something stirred. In sealed chambers where vacuum should have meant death, where cold should have frozen all biological processes, where isolation should have meant extinction, the flood survived. Not in its combat forms, not in its carrier forms, not even in its infection forms, but in spores. Microscopic fragments of corrupted biology that could survive for millennia in stasis, waiting for the day when containment failed and new hosts presented themselves. The Forerunners had known, had sealed the samples here, across dimensional barriers, with warnings in every language they knew, had left automated defenses that would kill anything that approached, had done everything possible to ensure this horror remained isolated forever. But they had not accounted for religious zealots who interpreted warnings as challenges, who believed themselves chosen by gods, who would breach containment in pursuit of divine knowledge. The Covenant fleet approached the planet, unaware that they were about to make the worst mistake in their species' history. And the clock was ticking. The Covenant assault carrier, resplendent fervor, still bearing the scars from the Infinity's Mac round, descended through the barren planet's thin atmosphere alongside 3 CCS-class battlecruisers. Hundreds of Phantom dropships and spirit transports launched from their hangar bays, carrying Sangheili warriors, Ungoi infantry, Mgalek Golo pairs, and Jiralhane shock troops. This was an army prepared for any resistance, any defense, any obstacle between them and the holy relics within. What they were not prepared for was what they would find. Shipmaster Artaze Vadum stood on his bridge, watching the deployment with his remaining eye, his scarred mandibles tight with unease. The Prophet of Regret's orders had been absolute. Breach the installation, secure all Forerunner artifacts, and allow no one, not the Empire, not the humans, Not even Covenant forces not directly under hierarchical command to interfere. The installation's defenses have been neutralized, his tactical officer reported. The corrupted constructs destroyed themselves, attempting to stop our advance. The entrance is now accessible. Corrupted? Ritas repeated. The word carrying weight. Not damaged, not degraded. Corrupted. The Forerunner's holy machines turned against their purpose. He looked at the warning glyphs still visible on the installation's exterior, partially translated by their linguistic AI. Quarantine. Containment. Death. These are not invitations, brothers. These are warnings. The prophet of regret has decreed we proceed. His operations officer reminded him gently. To question is to blaspheme, and to follow blindly is to die stupidly, Ritas countered. But the hierarchs have spoken, we proceed. But we proceed carefully. All warriors are to maintain sealed environment suits. No one removes their helmets. No one touches anything without scanning it first. We do not know what the gods sealed here, only that they wanted it to remain sealed. His caution would not be enough. On the planet's surface, the first Covenant forces entered the Forerunner installation through blast doors that had been breached by plasma cutters. Inside, the corridors stretched into darkness, illuminated only by faint emergency lighting that had somehow survived millennia of inactivity. The architecture was hauntingly beautiful curves and angles that seemed to flow rather than connect, metals that absorbed sound and created eerie silence. A Songhaili zealot named Kusovai led the initial breach team. His energy sword ignited and casting blue light across the ancient walls. Behind him, 30 warriors moved in tactical formation, their weapons ready, their training keeping them alert despite the religious awe they felt at walking through structures built by the gods themselves. Forward chambers appear to be laboratories, Kusavai reported over the tactical network. I am detecting stasis pods, thousands of them, extending deeper into the facility. Some show signs of containment failure. That should have been the warning that stopped everything. Should have triggered immediate withdrawal and orbital bombardment. But Kusavai was a zealot in every sense, a warrior who believed absolutely in the prophet's divine wisdom and the Covenant's holy mission. The gods left us knowledge, Kusavai declared to his warriors. We will claim it in their name. Continue forward. Map everything. Document all findings. They pressed deeper into the installation, their boots echoing on floors that had not felt footsteps in 10,000 years. The stasis pods lined the walls like massive transparent coffins, and through their murky surfaces, shapes could be seen, organic forms that had been sealed away, preserved in temporal suspension. What are they? One of the Ungoi asked nervously, his methane tank hissing as he breathed. They look wrong, diseased. They are holy relics, Kusavai said firmly. The gods. The stasis pod nearest to them cracked. Not shattered, not exploded, just cracked. A hairline fracture spread across its surface, and through that microscopic gap, something escaped, not visible to the naked eye, not detectable by their sensors, just spores, flood spores, preserved in stasis for millennia, now exposed to atmosphere and warmth and the presence of living hosts. The Ungoi breathed in, his methane recycler pulling atmosphere through filters that were designed to handle dust and particulates, not biological contaminants, engineered by a civilization that had mastered genetics before the Covenant species had discovered fire. I feel strange, the Ungoi said, his voice confused. My suit temperature is rising. I should... He never finished the sentence. His body convulsed, biomass corrupting at the cellular level as flood infection took hold with terrifying speed. His skin began to bubble and split, new growths erupting from flesh that was no longer his own. Within seconds, the creature that had been an Ungoi was gone, replaced by a flood infection form, a small, tentacled monstrosity that launched itself at the nearest Songheili warrior with mindless hunger. Contamination, Kusavai roared, his energy sword sweeping through the infection form and bisecting it. But it was too late. More stasis pods were cracking, their seals failing after millennia of degradation, and from each crack, more spores escaped, spreading through the recycled air, seeking hosts, seeking biomass to consume and corrupt. Fall back, Kusavai commanded, his religious certainty finally giving way to survival instinct. Seal the installation. No one else enters. But the Covenant's environmental protocols were designed for vacuum and toxic atmospheres, not for biological contamination that operated at the microscopic level. Warriors retreated, but some were already infected, their bodies hosting flood spores that would transform them within hours. The infection spread through the breach team like wildfire through dry grass. On the resplendent fervor, Artaz received the panic transmissions with the cold horror of someone who had seen this scenario play out before, not with the flood specifically, but with biological weapons deployed by desperate enemies. Contamination, infection, the need for absolute quarantine measures. Seal all hangars, Artaz ordered immediately. No returning craft are to be permitted aboard. All warriors on the planet's surface are to maintain position. And someone get me direct communication with the Prophet of Regret. This situation requires hierarchical authorization. But before he could establish communication, his sensors detected new arrivals. The Chimera emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the system, accompanied by 4 Imperial Star Destroyers and, flying in parallel formation but maintaining clear separation, several dozen UNSC dropships and corvettes that had been hastily restored to operational status. On the Chimera's bridge, Grand Admiral Thrawn studied the Covenant deployment with analytical precision. They have already entered the installation. Sensor readings show multiple biological signatures within the facility and signs of panic in their communications. Commander Lasky, what is your assessment? From his position aboard a commandeered UNSC Pelican leading a formation of Spartans and Marines, Lasky reviewed the sensor data being shared through the newly established Joint Tactical Network. What he saw made his blood run cold. They've breached containment, Lasky said, his voice tight. Thermal signatures show organic corruption spreading through their forces. Admiral, the flood is loose. We need to establish orbital cordon immediately. Nothing leaves that planet. Nothing, Master Chief, Thrawn said, activating communication with the Spartan, who was aboard another Pelican with Blue Team and Fire Team Osiris. You have experience with this organism. What is the minimum time before infection spreads beyond the breach site? Chief was silent for a moment, calculating based on decades of horrifying experience. Depends on flood, strain, and number of initial hosts. If they had a full breach team, call it 40 warriors, we have maybe 6 hours before infection forms, multiply enough to threaten the entire Covenant ground force. Maybe 12 before they start trying to capture ships and spread off planet. Then we have a narrow window, Thrawn concluded. All Imperial vessels. Establish orbital blockade. Nothing repeat. Nothing is to leave planetary atmosphere without my direct authorization. Prepare planetary bombardment protocols, but do not execute without confirmation. UNSC forces, what do you need to confirm containment breach? Boots on the ground, Chief replied. We need to see what we're dealing with. If containment can still be re-established, if the Covenant forces can self-quarantine, we might avoid having to glass the planet. But if the flood has spread beyond the initial breach point, then sterilization becomes necessary. Thrawn finished. Proceed, Master Chief. You have authorization to land and assess. Imperial forces will provide orbital support and prevent any escape attempts. As the UNSC dropships began their descent, Rites Vadim watched the Imperial and human forces arrive with conflicting emotions. Part of him was furious these heretics had no right to interfere with holy excavation. But another part, the part that was warrior first and zealot second, recognized that something had gone catastrophically wrong, and he needed answers more than he needed religious pride. Hail the Imperial Command Vessel, Artaz ordered. Open communications. Thrawn's image appeared on the resplendent fervor's holographic display, the Chiss Admiral studying Artaz with those unsettling red eyes. Shipmaster Vadim, Thrawn said, his pronunciation of the Sangheili name imperfect but understandable. I am Grand Admiral Thrawn. We have intercepted your communications and analyzed the situation. Your forces have breached a Forerunner containment facility and released a parasitic organism, correct? Ritas's mandibles flared in surprise that the Imperial commander knew so much, but he saw no benefit in denial. Correct. Our warriors report infection spreading through the breach team. We have sealed hangar bays and established quarantine protocols, but the contamination may already have spread beyond our ability to contain it. Then we have mutual interest in preventing catastrophic outcome, Thrawn said. The humans, your long-standing enemies, have experience fighting this organism. They call it the Flood. It is a parasitic intelligence that consumes sentient life and uses host bodies as combat forms. Left unchecked, it will consume your ground forces, then your fleet, then spread across the galaxy, killing every living thing it encounters. The gods would not have preserved such horror, Ta said, but his voice carried doubt. Your gods did not preserve it, Thrawn corrected. They imprisoned it. There is a difference. And now your forces have broken that prison. Shipmaster, I am offering temporary alliance. My forces and the UNSC personnel will land, assess the contamination, and determine whether containment is still possible. If it is, we will help you re-establish it. If it is not, then you will destroy everything. Ortez finished, understanding completely. Including my warriors still on the surface. Including everyone on the surface. Thrawn confirmed without hesitation. Because the alternative is extinction for all our species. Do you accept these terms? RDA's looked at his bridge crew, seeing their expressions reflecting his own internal struggle. Accept help from heretics and humans, or maintain religious purity while potentially dooming all Covenant forces in this system. It was not a difficult choice for a warrior who valued survival. I accept, Rutas said. Your forces may land. But understand, if this is treachery, if you use this crisis to attack my fleet, the Covenant will pursue your empire across this galaxy until either we are dead or you are. Understood, Thrawn said. I would expect nothing less. Transmitting landing coordinates now. And Shipmaster, may your gods watch over us all. We will need divine favor for what comes next. On the planet's surface, in the dark corridors of the Forerunner installation, the Flood spread. Infection forms skittered across ancient floors, seeking new hosts. Combat forms twisted amalgamations of Sangheili and Jiralhane, and Ungoi biomass lurched through the darkness. Their bodies no longer their own, their minds absorbed into the Flood's collective intelligence. And deep within the facility, in the central chamber where the Forerunners had conducted their final experiments, something ancient and terrible stirred. A Flood gravemind, or the beginning of one. The parasitic intelligence that formed when enough biomass accumulated, when enough minds were absorbed, when the Flood evolved from simple infection to coordinated intelligence. It was not yet fully formed, not yet powerful enough to speak or coordinate complex strategy. But it was aware, and it was hungry. The Pelicans descended through the thin atmosphere, their pilots fighting turbulence as they approached the installation. Master Chief stood in the crew compartment, checking his weapons one final time. MA-5D assault rifle loaded with armor-piercing rounds. M6D Magnum sidearm. Combat knife. Grenades. And most importantly, incendiary ammunition, because the Flood couldn't infect what was already ash. Remember your training. Chief transmitted to all UNSC forces. The Flood uses 3 primary forms. Infection forms small, tentacled, fast. Kill them before they touch you. Combat forms reanimated corpses. Strong, tough, but stupid. Aim for the arms and legs to disable, then burn the bodies. Carrier forms walking bombs full of infection forms. Shoot them from distance. Never let them get close. And if we encounter a gravemind? Locke asked from his Pelican. We run, Chief said simply. Then we call for orbital bombardment and pray we're out of the blast radius. The Pelicans landed outside the installation's breached entrance, their ramps dropping to reveal a landscape of Covenant carnage. Dead warriors lay scattered across the ground, their bodies already showing signs of Flood infection, unnatural growths, twisted limbs, biomass corruption that defied medical explanation. God, Palmer breathed, her voice tight over the comm. Is this what you've been fighting for 30 years? This is what the Forerunners built the Halo array to stop, Chief replied, moving toward the entrance with his rifle ready. And now it's loose again. Stay sharp, stay together. And if anyone gets infected, we put them down immediately. No exceptions. Behind him, Blue Team, Fire Team Osiris, and a company of UNSC Marines advanced in disciplined formation, and alongside them, keeping careful distance but moving with equal purpose, came Imperial stormtroopers and specialized units that Thrawn had designated for biological containment operations. Two enemy forces, united by necessity, advancing into a Forerunner installation that had become a charnel house. The flood waited in the darkness, and deep in the installation, in chambers that the Forerunners had hoped would remain sealed forever, something that had once been Sangheili Zealot. Kusovai opened mouths that should not exist, and spoke with a voice composed of 1,000 absorbed minds. Biomass detected. Sentient intelligence approaching. New hosts. New hosts. We will consume. We will spread. We will. The proto-Gravemind's thoughts fractured, its forming intelligence not yet coherent enough for complex planning. But its hunger was absolute. Its purpose was clear. Feed. Grow. Spread. Consume. The mission had just become a race against evolution itself. The entrance to the Forerunner installation was a wound blast marks from plasma cutters, scorch marks from energy weapons, and organic corruption spreading across the ancient metal like cancer. Master Chief approached it with his rifle raised, his motion tracker lighting up with contacts that moved in patterns no living thing should move. Motion, multiple hostiles, bearing 270, Chief reported calmly. Combat forms. Estimate 15 contacts. From the darkness beyond the entrance, they came. What had been Covenant warriors Sangheili in ornate armor, Jiralhane in power suits, even Ungoi in their methane harnesses, were now twisted mockeries of life. Extra limbs sprouted from shoulders and torsos, tentacles writhed where heads should be, and biomass fused bodies together in grotesque combinations. They moved with jerky, unnatural speed, their weapons discarded in favor of razor-sharp appendages grown from corrupted flesh. Open fire, Chief commanded. The UNSC and Imperial forces opened fire simultaneously, armor-piercing rounds from assault rifles, blaster bolts from E-11 seconds, and the distinctive crack of DMRs picking off targets with precision. The combat forms staggered under the impacts, but they didn't stop. They didn't feel pain, didn't fear death, didn't understand anything except the drive to consume more biomass. Aim for the limbs, Chief shouted, demonstrating by putting 3 rounds into a combat form's legs, dropping it to the ground. Disable them, then burn the bodies. A Marine with a flamethrower stepped forward, bathing the downed combat forms in liquid fire that turned flood biomass into ash and smoke. The creatures thrashed briefly, then went still as the fire consumed them beyond the flood's ability to repair. Beside the UNSC forces, Imperial stormtroopers learned quickly, adjusting their fire patterns from center mass to extremities, crippling the combat forms before burning them with thermal grenades. The coordination wasn't perfect, there was still mistrust. Still the knowledge that they were enemies cooperating out of necessity, but it was functional. Clear. Linda 058 reported from her overwatch position, her sniper rifle having eliminated 3 combat forms that had been trying to flank the main force. Entrance secure. Move in, Chief ordered. 2-column formation. UNSC left, Imperial right. Watch your sectors and call out contacts immediately. They advanced into the installation, their combined lights pushing back the darkness, but also revealing the horror of what had happened here. Covenant bodies lay scattered throughout the corridors, some killed by flood infection, others by their own comrades trying to stop the spread. Blood, both red and the luminous blue of Sangheili, painted the walls. And everywhere, the biomass corruption spread like mold, pulsing with unnatural life. Chief, we're detecting mass organic signatures ahead. Tanaka reported from her position in the formation. Large chamber, multiple hostiles, and something else energy readings that don't match any known flood forms. The Gravemind, Chief said grimly. It's already forming. We need to reach it before it becomes fully sentient. Move faster. They pressed forward, encountering pockets of resistance infection forms that launched themselves from ventilation shafts. Carrier forms that exploded when shot, sending infection forms scattering in all directions. Each encounter cost them Marines with compromised armor who had to be put down before infection took hold. stormtroopers who fell to flood combat forms and had to be burned before they could resurrect. And with each loss, Chief felt the familiar weight of command, the knowledge that every death was a calculation he'd made about acceptable risk versus mission necessity. It never got easier. It never should. In orbit above, Grand Admiral Thrawn monitored the ground operation from the Chimera, while simultaneously coordinating the blockade. Covenant ships watched Imperial vessels watched Covenant ships, and both fleets maintained weapons lock on each other while claiming to be focused on preventing anything from leaving the planet. "Admiral, we're detecting slipspace signatures at the edge of the system," Commander Vanto reported. "Multiple contacts, unknown configuration. They're Covenant, sir. Different fleet from Shipmaster Vadam's forces." Thrawn pulled up the sensor data, seeing 6 Covenant cruisers holding position just inside the system's edge, clearly observing but not engaging. The Prophet of Truth Shadow Fleet. He sent observers to document whatever disaster unfolds here. Interesting. That suggests internal Covenant politics are more fractured than we realized. Should we engage them, sir? No. Let them watch. Let them see what happens when religious fervor overrides strategic caution. The more the Covenant leadership fractures, the better for us. On High Charity, the Prophet of Truth watched the unfolding situation through reports from his Shadow Fleet with a mixture of satisfaction and calculation. Regret had indeed stumbled into disaster, a disaster that Truth had anticipated and prepared to exploit. The Prophet of Regret authorized breach of a contaminated Forerunner facility. Truth said to his inner circle of loyal followers, "Against all warnings, against strategic wisdom, he pursued glory and found only death." When this crisis concludes, the other species within the Covenant will question his judgment. They will wonder if the prophets are truly guided by divine wisdom, or if we are simply aging politicians making catastrophic errors. "And you will provide alternative leadership," one of his advisors concluded. "Position yourself as the voice of caution and wisdom that could have prevented this disaster, if only the other hierarchs had listened." Precisely. Truth confirmed. "Let Regret's ambition be his downfall. I will emerge as the prophet who could have saved us all." It was ruthless. It was calculating. And it was exactly the kind of political maneuvering that had kept Truth in power for decades. Deep within the Forerunner installation, Master Chief and his combined force reached the central chamber, a vast space that had once been a research laboratory but was now something from a nightmare. Biomass covered every surface, pulsing with unnatural life. Bodies, hundreds of them, were fused together into a massive organic structure that reached from floor to ceiling. A horrific amalgamation of Covenant warriors consumed and integrated into the forming gravemind. And from that mass, tentacles emerged, massive, powerful appendages that had once been arms and legs, but were now weapons of the Flood's collective intelligence. The proto-gravemind, not yet fully sentient but aware enough to recognize threats. Sentience detected. The gravemind's voice boomed from a dozen mouths simultaneously, each one belonging to a different absorbed victim. "New biomass. We will consume. We will integrate. You will become us. Light it up," Chief commanded. And the combined forces opened fire with everything they had. Assault rifles, battle rifles, sniper rifles, blaster cannons, thermal grenades, and rocket launchers. All converged on the gravemind, tearing through biomass and severing tentacles. The creature screamed, a sound composed of hundreds of voices in agony, but it did not die. It regenerated, pulling biomass from the environment, incorporating the bodies of fallen flood forms to repair damage faster than they could inflict it. "It's not working," Palmer shouted over the sound of gunfire. "We're not doing enough damage." Chief's tactical mind raced through options. Standard weapons weren't sufficient. They needed something bigger, something that could destroy the gravemind's entire biomass at once before it could regenerate. "Blue team, fall back to the entrance," Chief ordered. "Everyone else fighting retreat. We're bringing down the whole installation." "Chief, what about the Covenant forces still on the surface?" Fred asked as Blue Team began their withdrawal. "They're already infected or dead," Chief replied coldly. "We can't save them, but we can prevent this from spreading further. Move." The combined force retreated in disciplined order, laying demolition charges on support structures as they went. creating a daisy chain of explosives that would bring the entire installation down on itself. The Gravemind sent combat forms in pursuit, but concentrated fire kept them at bay long enough for the charges to be set. They emerged from the installation into the thin daylight of the barren planet, sprinting for their dropships as the demolition charges began their countdown. Behind them, the Gravemind's voice echoed from the entrance, no longer just hungry but aware enough to be angry. You cannot stop the flood. We are eternal. We are inevitable. We will. The charges detonated. The installation collapsed inward, support structures failing, ceilings crashing down, thousands of tons of Forerunner metal and stone crushing the Gravemind and everything within. The entrance sealed itself under the weight of collapsing architecture, dust and debris billowing outward in a massive cloud. For a moment, there was silence. Then, from beneath the rubble, movement. A tentacle emerged, pushing aside debris, searching for escape. The Gravemind was damaged, but not destroyed. It was adapting, surviving, preparing to spread. Thrawn, this is Chief. Master Chief transmitted to orbit. Target our position with orbital bombardment. Maximum yield. Authorization code Sierra 117 Alpha. In orbit, Thrawn received the transmission and understood immediately. All Imperial vessels, prepare planetary bombardment. Target coordinates transmitted. Full turbolaser batteries. Sustained fire pattern. Execute on my mark. Shipmaster Artas Vadum heard the order and felt his warrior's heart clench. His forces were still down there. Warriors who had served with honor, who had fought beside him for years, and now they would be burned from orbit because his prophet's arrogance had doomed them. Shipmaster, his operations officer said quietly, we could interfere. Our plasma torpedoes could intercept the Imperial bombardment, give our warriors chance to evacuate. RDA's was silent for a long moment, wrestling with the decision. Honor demanded he save his warriors. But survival, not just his own, but his species, his civilizations, demanded he let them die. No, Ratas said finally, his voice heavy with the weight of command. We let the humans and Imperials do what must be done. Our warriors die with honor, containing a threat that would have consumed us all. Let their sacrifice be remembered as such. It was the hardest order he'd ever given, but it was the right one. All ships, fire, Thrawn commanded. Green turbo laser fire rained from orbit. Dozens of Imperial Star Destroyers pouring their full power onto the planet's surface. The area around the Forerunner installation became a hell of superheated plasma and vaporized rock, temperatures reaching levels that would sterilize every organic molecule within kilometers. From the UNSC dropships pulling away at maximum acceleration, the survivors watched the bombardment, seeing the planet's surface glow red, then white, as orbital fire turned Earth to glass. Did we get it? Palmer asked, her voice tight. Chief watched the bombardment continue, monitoring sensor readings for any sign of surviving flood biomass. After 5 minutes of sustained fire, the readings finally stabilized. No organic signatures, no movement, no indication that anything had survived the sterilization. It's contained, Chief confirmed. The flood is eliminated. This time, as the dropships returned to their respective fleets, as the joint operation concluded and forces that had fought together began to separate back into their natural hostilities, Commander Lasky stood on the observation deck of the Perseverance and reflected on what had just happened. They had fought alongside the Empire against a common enemy. They had saved Covenant forces from their own religious hubris. They had prevented a flood outbreak that would have consumed both galaxies. And in the process, they had proven something important. That cooperation between enemies was possible when survival demanded it. Commander, Grand Admiral Thrawn's voice came through the comm. I would speak with you privately. There are matters we should discuss regarding future contingencies. Lasky made his way to a secure communication room, where Thrawn's holographic image appeared with its characteristic calm analytical expression. Commander Lasky, Thrawn began. Today we demonstrated that our civilizations can cooperate when facing existential threats. The question now becomes, what do we do with that knowledge? You're asking if we're willing to establish ongoing cooperation against future threats. Lasky translated. I am suggesting that the strategic landscape has changed. Thrawn clarified. The Empire, the Covenant, and the UNSC all now know that this galaxy contains threats beyond our individual conflicts. Ancient installations, parasitic organisms, dimensional anomalies, these are dangers that require coordination to address. What happened today could happen again. And next time, we might not be fortunate enough to contain it. Lasky was silent for a moment. You're proposing a treaty between the Empire and the UNSC. I am proposing pragmatic acknowledgement of reality, Thrawn corrected. Not friendship, not alliance, but recognition that some threats transcend politics. When those threats emerge, we cooperate. And between those crises, we maintain our respective positions as adversaries. Can you accept that distinction? I'll need to discuss it with my senior staff, Lasky said. But personally? Yes. I can accept that we fight each other 99 days. And fight together on the 100th when something worse shows up. It's not ideal, but nothing about our situation is ideal. Agreed, Thrawn said. I will prepare formal protocols for emergency cooperation and transmit them for your review. And Commander, your Master Chief performed admirably today. He demonstrated not just combat effectiveness, but leadership and strategic thinking that saved lives on both sides. Please convey my respect. I will, Lasky confirmed. As the transmission ended, Lasky looked out at the scarred planet below, its surface still glowing from orbital bombardment. They had won today. Barely. At terrible cost. But they had proven something vital. That even in a galaxy far from home, surrounded by enemies, humanity could find ways to survive. Not through strength alone, not through technology alone, but through the willingness to adapt, to cooperate, and to do whatever was necessary when extinction was the alternative. On High Charity, the prophet of regret sat in his private chambers, receiving reports of the disaster he had authorized. Over 3,000 warriors lost, a Forerunner installation destroyed, and worst of all, his reputation damaged beyond repair by the catastrophic error of breaching quarantine protocols. The prophet of truth will use this against me, Regret said quietly to his advisors. He will position himself as the voice of wisdom while painting me as reckless and foolish. Perhaps, one advisor said carefully, it is time to consider alternative strategies. The humans and the Empire demonstrated that cooperation against common threats is possible. Perhaps the great journey need not require humanity's extinction. Perhaps there are other paths. Heresy, Regret whispered. But his voice carried uncertainty rather than condemnation. And on the bridge of the resplendent fervor, Shipmaster Artus Vadum stood in silence, mourning warriors who had died following orders he had known were foolish. His faith in the prophets, already strained by years of political maneuvering and questionable decisions, cracked a little more. The humans saved us, Urtius said quietly to his most trusted officers. Our sworn enemies prevented catastrophe that our own leaders authorized. What does that say about our holy mission? None of them answered. But all of them were thinking the same thing. That perhaps the great journey was not what the prophets claimed it was. Seeds of doubt, planted in the fertile ground of disaster. The galaxy had survived. Barely. But nothing would ever be quite the same. 3 civilizations, from 2 universes, now bound together by the knowledge that some enemies were worse than each other, and that survival sometimes required setting aside old hatreds to face new horrors. The dimensional breach was closed. The flood was contained. The immediate crises were resolved. But the long-term consequences, the political shifts, the changing allegiances, the questions that could no longer be ignored, those were only beginning. 3 months had passed since the flood containment operation. 3 months of uneasy coexistence, careful negotiations, and the slow process of establishing protocols for a situation that should never have existed. 3 civilizations from 2 universes, forced into proximity by circumstances none of them had chosen. The dimensional breach remained sealed, a faint scar in space-time that both the UNSC and the Empire monitored constantly. Dr. Glassman had established permanent sensor arrays around the site, watching for any sign that the barriers between universes might weaken again. So far, they held. But everyone who understood the mathematics knew it was a temporary stability, not a permanent solution. The dimensional fabric had been torn once. It could be torn again. Commander Thomas Lasky stood on the observation deck of the newly commissioned UNSC Forward Unto Dawn, a frigate that had been constructed using a combination of salvaged Infinity components, Imperial manufacturing facilities secretly accessed through Thrawn's cooperation, and resources bartered from neutral systems. It wasn't the Infinity. It would never be the Infinity, but it was a ship, crewed by UNSC personnel, flying under human command. It was a start. "Final status report, sir," Captain Palmer said, approaching with a datapad. "We've accounted for 19,473 survivors from the Infinity. 1,500 died in the dimensional breach collapse. 387 were lost to flood infection during the containment operation. The rest are distributed across Imperial protective custody, working in various capacities, and maintaining as much UNSC operational structure as we can manage." "And the crew assignments for the Dawn?" Lasky asked. 200 personnel, mostly volunteers who wanted to return to active duty. Chiefs agreed to serve as security chief. Blue Team and Fire Team Osiris are assigned as rapid response. We've got enough firepower to defend ourselves, enough speed to run when we need to, and enough diplomatic credibility thanks to the flood operation that most factions will think twice before shooting at us. Lasky nodded, accepting the reality of their situation. They were no longer the pride of the UNSC fleet. They were refugees with one ship, stranded in a hostile galaxy, surviving on reputation and the goodwill of an Imperial admiral who valued pragmatism over ideology. "Has Thrawn made contact?" Lasky asked. "He transmitted an hour ago," Palmer confirmed. "Wants to meet with you before we depart. Says it's important." The meeting took place on neutral ground, a remote space station in unclaimed territory, far from both Imperial patrols and Covenant religious territories. Lasky arrived aboard a shuttle with Master Chief as security, meeting Thrawn in a sparse conference room that had been swept for listening devices by both sides. "Commander Lasky." Thrawn greeted him with a slight nod. "Master Chief, thank you for coming. I know trust between our organizations remains limited." "You've honored your agreement so far," Lasky acknowledged. "That counts for something. What did you want to discuss?" Thrawn activated a holographic display showing the dimensional breach site and surrounding space. "I have been analyzing the energy patterns from the breach, comparing them to ancient records in the Imperial archives. What I discovered is concerning." He zoomed in on specific energy signatures. "The Forerunner installation we destroyed was not unique. My researchers have identified at least 6 similar installations scattered across this galaxy, all of them showing the same dimensional manipulation technology, all of them likely serving as quarantine facilities for threats the Forerunners wish to isolate from their home universe. Meaning there are 5 more potential flood outbreaks waiting to happen," Chief said quietly. "Or worse," Thrawn confirmed. "We do not know what else the Forerunners sealed away. What we do know is that the Covenant's religious imperative to study Forerunner artifacts puts them on a collision course with these installations. Eventually, they will breach another one. And we may not be as fortunate next time. You want ongoing cooperation," Lasky concluded. "Joint monitoring of these sites, rapid response protocols, shared intelligence." "I want survival," Thrawn corrected. "For all our civilizations. The Empire is vast and powerful, but it is not equipped to fight parasitic infections that operate outside conventional warfare. Your experience is invaluable, and in exchange for that cooperation, I can offer you something you desperately need. A place in this galaxy. Not as prisoners, not as refugees, but as recognized entities with legitimate standing." "The Empire doesn't recognize anything it doesn't control," Lasky challenged. "The Emperor doesn't," Thrawn agreed. "But I have been authorized to negotiate exceptions for strategic necessities. If you agree to serve as consultants and rapid response forces for dimensional and biological threats, I can ensure your forces are granted safe passage, access to resources, and autonomy within specified parameters. You would be contractors rather than subjects, free to operate your ship, maintain your military structure, and pursue your own interests, as long as you respond when existential threats emerge." It was, Lasky recognized, the best deal they were likely to get. Not freedom, not a way home, but autonomy and purpose in a galaxy that otherwise saw them as either enemies or curiosities. I'll need guarantees, Lasky said, written protocols, verification mechanisms, and most importantly, our intelligence on Earth's location and UNSC military capabilities remains classified. That's non-negotiable. Agreed. Thrawn said without hesitation. The Empire has no interest in invading your home universe. Such an action would be strategically foolish, logistically impossible, and would destroy the very cooperation we're trying to establish. Your secrets remain yours, Commander. We simply want your help containing threats that endanger us all. Master Chief, who had been silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke. What about the Covenant? They're still hunting humanity, still driven by religious imperative to exterminate us. Are we supposed to just ignore that? No, Thrawn said. But the Covenant is fracturing. Our intelligence suggests significant internal dissent following the flood disaster. The Prophet of Regret's authority has been severely damaged. Shipmaster Vadam is questioning the Hierarch's judgment openly. And there are reports of Sangheli commanders refusing orders that would result in unnecessary warrior deaths. He pulled up classified intelligence reports showing internal Covenant communications. Their unity is cracking. Not quickly, but inevitably. Religious certainty cannot survive repeated catastrophic failures. Given time, the Covenant may fragment into factions, some still committed to your extinction, others willing to consider alternatives. When that happens, having established relationships with pragmatic commanders like Vadam could prove invaluable. You're suggesting we help accelerate the Covenant's collapse, Lasky said. I am suggesting we let natural political forces run their course, while ensuring we're positioned to exploit the results. Thrawn deactivated the holographic display. Commander, I am not asking you to abandon your principles or betray your species. I am asking you to recognize that survival in this galaxy requires patience, strategy, and willingness to see opportunities in chaos. The Empire does this naturally. So does the UNSC based on your history fighting the Covenant. We are not so different in that regard. Lasky was silent for a long moment, weighing options, calculating risks, considering consequences. Then he extended his hand. We accept. Limited cooperation. Verified autonomy. Mutual defense against existential threats. But Thrawn, if the Empire betrays this agreement, if we discover you're using our cooperation as cover for invasion of our universe, then we become enemies again, permanently. Thrawn shook the offered hand, his red eyes meeting Lasky's with genuine respect. Understood. And I promise you, Commander, I have no desire to make enemies of people who fight as effectively as you do. Much better to have you as uncomfortable allies than determined adversaries. As Lasky and Chief returned to their shuttle, Palmer was waiting with news. Sir, we've received a message. It came through that smuggler network Thrawn mentioned, the one with connections to the rebellion. What does it say? Lasky asked. Palmer handed him a datapad showing a brief text message, encrypted but decrypted by their communications AI. To the UNSC forces. We remember. The rebellion remembers what you did for us. How you fought beside us when you had no obligation. If you ever need sanctuary, if the Empire betrays you, if you need help, contact us. We pay our debts. Mon Mothma. Lasky smiled slightly. So, we have friends in this galaxy after all. Friends, contractors, and uncomfortable allies, Chief observed. Could be worse. Could always be worse, Lasky agreed. But we're still here. Still fighting. Still UNSC. That's what matters. On High Charity, the political situation had deteriorated rapidly. The Prophet of Regret found himself isolated, his fellow hierarchs distancing themselves from his decisions. The Prophet of Truth maneuvered carefully, positioning himself as the voice of wisdom and caution. And the Prophet of Mercy watched both, with growing concern that their theocratic government was consuming itself from within. The Sangheli are questioning us, Mercy said during a private meeting of the three hierarchs. Not openly, not yet. But I hear reports of commanders refusing orders. Warriors debating our interpretations of Scripture. Whispers that perhaps humanity is not the great enemy we claim them to be. Heresy, Regret spat. All of it. Heresy that should be purged. And how do you propose we purge an entire warrior caste? Truth asked mildly. The Sangheili are the backbone of our military. Without them, the covenant collapses. Unless, he trailed off meaningfully. Unless what? Mercy prompted. Unless we find alternative warriors. The Jirohane have served loyally and without question. They do not philosophize or debate, they obey. Perhaps it is time to elevate them, reduce our dependence on Sangheili who have become problematic. It was a seed planted carefully. A strategy that would take years to implement. But Truth had always thought in terms of decades, not days. The great journey could wait. Power could not. Aboard the resplendent fervor, Shipmaster Artaz Vadam met with his most trusted officers in a secured chamber, discussing matters that would have been unthinkable months earlier. The humans saved our lives, one of them said quietly. They could have let the flood consume us, eliminated an enemy without lifting a weapon. Instead, they risked themselves to contain the infection. Why? Because they understand that some enemies are worse than others. Ritas replied. A lesson the prophets have yet to learn. He looked at his assembled officers, warriors who had served with honor, who had questioned orders but followed them out of loyalty. I will not speak treason. I will not call for rebellion. But I will say this. We are Sangheili. We follow the path of honor, not the path of blind obedience. If the hierarchs order us to commit dishonor, we have the right to question. Remember that. It wasn't revolution. Not yet. But it was the beginning of something that would eventually shatter the covenant from within, and everyone in that room knew it. In the unknown regions, far from the conflicts and politics of the core, Emperor Palpatine received Thrawn's reports with calculating interest. The Chiss Admiral had established working relationship with the UNSC, contained a biological threat, and positioned the Empire to exploit both dimensional technology and the Covenant's internal fractures. Masterful. Palpatine admitted to the empty throne room. Thrawn sees the long game, sees opportunity where others see only chaos. This is why I tolerate his unconventional methods. He delivers results that exceed expectation. But beneath the approval, Palpatine's mind worked on deeper plans. The UNSC represented a civilization from another universe, one that had developed technology the Empire had not. The Covenant represented a theocratic alliance that could be corrupted, manipulated, turned to serve imperial purposes, and the dimensional breach, while closed, proved that barriers between universes could be crossed. Perhaps, Palpatine mused, the Force is not limited to a single galaxy. Perhaps there are other universes where the dark side could spread, an empire spanning multiple realities. Now, that would be true dominion. It was a thought for the future. For now, he would let Thrawn's strategies play out, let the pieces move into position, and when the time was right, the Emperor would make his own moves. Aboard the Forward Unto Dawn, Commander Lasky stood on the bridge as his ship prepared for its first independent mission, surveying one of the 6 remaining Forerunner installations Thrawn had identified, ensuring it remained sealed and monitoring for any Covenant activity. All stations report ready, sir, Palmer announced. Slipspace drive is charged. We're ready to jump on your command. Lasky looked at the view screen, at the unfamiliar stars that would never quite feel like home. His crew, 19,000 survivors reduced to 200 active personnel, waited for his order. Behind him, Master Chief stood at tactical, blue team at their stations, ready for whatever they would face. They were UNSC. They were humanity. They were far from home, surrounded by enemies and uncertain allies, facing threats they barely understood. And they would survive, because that's what humans did. Helm, Lasky said clearly. Execute jump. Let's go to work. The Forward Unto Dawn vanished into slipspace, beginning its mission in a galaxy that would never quite accept them but could no longer ignore them. The dimensional breach was closed, but the consequences of 3 universes colliding would echo across decades, shaping politics, wars, and alliances in ways none of them could fully predict. The Empire would continue its quest for absolute control. The Covenant would fracture. Eventually, under the weight of contradictions their faith could not resolve, the UNSC would survive, adapt, and carve out a place in a galaxy that wasn't theirs. And somewhere, Across dimensional barriers that grew thinner with each passing day, the Milky Way galaxy continued without them, unaware of the battles being fought in their name. The war wasn't over. It had simply entered a new phase. 3 civilizations. 2 universes. 1 impossible situation. And somehow, against all odds, they would find a way forward, because the alternative was extinction, and none of them were ready to accept that. Not yet.